All right. I see thumbs up. Okay. Welcome everyone to this SHAPE Hybrid. I am Jenny DeCero. I am the interim director of Equality State Policy Center. And so I'm really excited to welcome you and be on this side of SHAPE. My first SHAPE was about 5 years ago. And it was in person. So this virtual hybrid is an exciting new evolution for SHAPE. I am delighted to be a part of it. And I want to really thank a few people before we jump in. First of all, the amazing team of the Equality State Policy Center with Rosa, who sent all of the hosts little boxes, and hopefully you all got it, and will make the party sites really effective and feel really supported, and gathering lunches and emails and all of that. So thank you, Rosa. And Marissa, who is managing our tech and breakout rooms, which is a talent that we all need on every team. So thank you, Marissa. ESPC is a nonpartisan coalition-based organization. We advance fair elections and transparent government in support of all Wyoming communities, which is why you all are here, I hope. We have a great agenda today, and we have some amazing sponsors that have enabled us to be able to do that. So I am going to thank our sponsors, which include the Wyoming Community Foundation, the Wyoming Women's Foundation, the Natrona Collective Health Trust, and Service Leadership Community Engagement. So we just really appreciate everyone for supporting this. And then just to call out before I introduce our speakers, we have live hosts events that is being held by Natrona Collective Health Trust, Wyoming Equality, the Natrona Health Collective Health Trust is in Casper, Wyoming Equality in Cheyenne, the Chair Project in Rock Springs. And I think that's everyone. So with that, I'm going to, I did it in less than 10 minutes. I must have forgotten something. But I am going to assume we're ready to jump in. I don't see any red flags in the chat or anything to me, so I think we're ready. So I'm going to just transition into welcoming and introducing our first speaker, who is Kellyanne Thomas. She is currently a senior studying political science at Barry University. In 2020, Kelly was elected to Community Council 14, which makes zoning and land use decisions in unincorporated South Miami-Dade County. Kelly has 10 years of combined grassroots activism and electoral organizing experience across the state of Florida. Her favorite hobbies are journaling, watching YouTube, and singing karaoke. So with that, I'm going to just turn it over to her. We're a little ahead agenda, which is fine because might get behind. And why does it matter?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Perfect. Good morning, Wyoming. My name is Kellyanne. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be your keynote speaker this morning and speak to you all at the Equality State Policy Center. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a moment. Sorry, give me a second. Sorry, y'all. Let me share my screen really quick. Oops. Tab. Let's see. All right. One moment, you all. Technical difficulties. Just loading my presentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
No
All right,
worries.
hold on,
We're ahead of
All right.
schedule. So
Gotta click on it. All right, sounds good. There we go. I think we got it now. Is it a full screen?
Looks great.
Present? All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Can I
looks
get
great.
a yes? Okay. All right, perfect. You're gonna have to talk to me because I can't see you all. Again, my name is Kelly Ann Thomas, aka the girl who just showed up, and I'm really, really excited to share with you all my experiences in organizing and activism work for Shape Wyoming 2024. So I know this information is in your booklets, which are really awesome. Thank you, Rosa and the team, for sending me one all the way from Wyoming to Miami. Just a quick intro about myself. My name is Kelly Ann Thomas. I'm 35 years old, and I'm based all the way on the opposite side of the country in Miami, Florida. I was a former vice chair of Community Council 14 in Miami-Dade County. I also served as a lead organizer and activist for several years. And currently, I'm a student at Barry University. I'm a senior studying political science. So I want to start off my segment by pitching a question to you all for thought. I'd like for this to be an interactive presentation, so feel free to come off mute if you want to answer or just type in the chat your thoughts. I wanted to ask you all just a simple question. When was there a moment in your life when you had to act? I mean, a moment where you just had enough was enough, you were fed up, and you just had to do something. Um, I want you all to go back in time and think about that very moment where enough was enough for you and you just had to stand up and act. And more importantly, I want you to go back in time to like how you felt in that moment. That moment for me was back in 2014, 10 years ago. That's when my activism journey started. I was sitting at my desk at work. I was an entry-level analyst at an office job. And at that time, Michael Brown was an 18-year-old student who was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. It was a very famous instance of police killing, and I'm sure maybe some of you are familiar, maybe some of you may be too young to know. But that was not the first case of police violence that I had heard about. Michael Brown being killed in Missouri was not even the first case of police violence that I was upset about. But that case was different for me. It just struck me differently. I don't know if it was the way his body lied in the street for hours. I'm not sure if sorry, you all, that's my alarm. I don't know if it was the racist comments that I saw online, but either way, I just remember sitting at my desk back in 2014, just feeling pure rage. So I happened to be scrolling on social media at the time, and I saw that Dream Defenders was having this protest. So I decided to go. I went to that protest, right in my work clothes, right in my business casual attire, just to join others and see what it was about. And that was my very first protest. At that Dream Defenders protest, I met with other young folks who were just as outraged about what happened in Ferguson as I was. We had marched for hours downtown. We blocked traffic. We were chanting. We were disrupting and making our voices heard. That night, I found a community of other people who were just as upset as I was about police brutality and needed to act. And that night, I became an activist. So my passion for activism grew, and I continued to show up for every protest I knew about, mainly police mainly protests about unjustified killings of Black men at the hands of police. But some of these events were, some of these protests were about different things that didn't even affect me. For example, a couple of years back, there was a situation where people of Haitian descent living in the Dominican Republic were just being unjustly deported back to Haiti. And a lot of those people didn't even live there. Could you imagine living in one country and just being unfairly deported into your home country, maybe a country that you never knew of? Like that was something that just really resonated with me. Also, at one point, the nation's largest center for unaccompanied minor children opened up in a neighborhood, opened up in an area right across the street from my neighborhood. This private facility, which was called the Homestead Facility for Unaccompanied Minors, were holding minors from South America that were seeking asylum. And this center was operating with no transparency. They were holding these children for months, and this was all federally funded by the government. So it didn't matter that like I was an American and these issues had nothing to do with me. I feel that in situations of injustice, you don't stand idle. If you can, you stand in solidarity with and for others. So some of the pictures are just some of the protests that I've attended. And for full disclosure, my hairstyle has changed a lot over the past 10 years. So I promise you it's still me. That's me on I-95 with a couple of others protesting police violence. That's another protest during the election where I'm in the afro at the top. And then at the bottom, that's just another protest that I attended um, a couple of years ago. Others began to take notice of my activism. I began to make friends with other people. I found community. I attended meetings and events, and I got involved. I started to lead chants. I knew with confidence, and I was even asked to lead protests, which was a real privilege for me and a major deal. Eventually, I was recommended for a position at a nonprofit, and I got hired as a full-time organizer in 2018. So my first campaign was another instance of me not being personally affected, but supporting others. In 2019, several bus routes in my community were at danger of being eliminated, and there are other bus routes that ended up being privatized, but the private company had substandard buses. So what I decided to do is take a small group of bus riders to the county commission meetings every month to complain about the bus service. At that time, I admit we really didn't know what we were doing. I was a new organizer, and my job didn't provide a lot of support around this issue. But we kept showing up. And eventually, a news article about our struggles made the front page of the newspaper. And also, 3 years later, one of the bus routes that we fought for ended up coming from privatization to county control again. So I just want to encourage you all that sometimes you might be in situations where you don't have a lot of knowledge of what you may be doing, or you may be new to it, and working on some of the issues may take time. But continuing to show up in moments that you're needed to bring attention to a cause will give you the victory. In showing up, you have to be willing to work. As an organizer, I worked through local, state, and national election cycles, learning about what's on the ballot, candidates running, and educating the community on what's at stake is not easy at all. It takes several months of outreach to voters to make sure that they are prepared. This could look like phone banking, knocking doors, or helping members of your community create a plan to vote. I just want to go through some of the pictures that are here. So again, activism and advocacy takes work. This picture here is my friend Cameo. I mentioned being a part. I mentioned our story making the front page of the news, and that's her waiting at one of the bus stops. Here's a tweet of one of the members that I actually got to take to the county commission. And this is Miss Pauline. It says that she had to wait so long at a bus stop in Naranja, which is the neighborhood I grew up in, to take her to a polling place that she actually fainted. So it was really, really hard back then. These bus routes were being eliminated. The bus company that, like I said, became privatized was really substandard. And some of the work that I've been able to have a pleasure to put in the community on a local level, me and my friend Bertisha here was at a canvas showing support for Nancy Mateo, who is running for office. And also at the bottom, that's me with the NAACP registering people to vote in the neighborhood. So showing up and doing this advocacy work really takes work. I have another question for you all. If you could think back, how have you shown up to advocate for others? Think of some past actions that you've taken, or maybe some events that you've been to. I like you to all like reflect on that question, and then we'll circle back at it towards the end of my presentation. So in 2020, this was the year that the world changed as we knew it. The COVID-19 virus became a worldwide pandemic, claiming lives and putting society at risk. And in a panic, my organization at the time shifted. Sorry, you all, some noise in the background, but my organization at the time shifted from doing in-person community organizing to remote work. We were charting unknown territory, and it was really scary. Florida, however, was wide open for business, with our governor putting the lives of frontline workers at risk. Also, many times my city became the #1 hotspot for COVID-19 due to the governor's lack of protections. My apologies, there's some noise in the background. We cautiously protested the governor and the failed presidential candidate, Ron DeSantis, his actions by wearing masks, keeping our distance, and driving in car caravans to stay apart. So in the middle, here's a picture of me back in 2020 at a protest we did where we were pretty much saying relief, not reopening. Because again, Florida was open during the pandemic. There were a lot of businesses, spring breakers were still coming down here. And we were protesting that the governor needed to like really take people's lives into account and not be focused on making profits. Also, this year was when George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, which that case sent the country in a rage. Several cities erupted in protest. It was an extremely dangerous time. And I decided to join the Sea of People to protest, to denounce police violence in the middle of that summer. Because of my involvement, I was interviewed by the New York Times, which was just an awesome experience. As you can see, here's some clips from the article that I was a part of. Here's me at the bottom of a protest saying Black Lives Matter. The article just uplifted the fact that like people were protesting and taking a risk in the middle of the pandemic. And my response to that was simply this: the police violence against Black communities, that is a pandemic too. People were willing to risk their lives, to risk their health, to show solidarity with Black people. And yeah, that's another instance. Sometimes in doing activism work, when you're passionate about something, it may be risky, but I really advise you all still to just take a stand in those moments and show solidarity with others if you're able. Also in 2020, showing up could also mean running for office. That year, my local community council seat was up for election. I had stumbled across community council while doing research several months prior on the county commission website. And I honestly didn't know much about the position, but I did happen to meet the requirements. And I looked up the current person who was in the position, and I didn't know much about them. So after having a conversation with my family, I decided to run for community council that year. I do admit stepping up to run for office was a huge risk. It was a huge investment. I had to take a leave of office from my job. I had to borrow money from my parents, and it was overall a big gamble. But thankfully, with support from the community and knowledge from electoral politics, from being an organizer, I was elected. So I really want to encourage you all today. There may be an opportunity for you to step into a leadership role now or in the future. What you are doing now, this training, this is a leadership role. You all being trained to be advocates and lobbyists at the state legislature. Maybe you may be doubting your abilities, but I encourage you all to still show up. Everything you know, everything that you've experienced has you ready in this moment. And I encourage you again to step up, show up, and step into your power. So here's some pictures of me like serving on community council. This was a huge responsibility and a position that I did not take lightly. Our council was in charge of making land use and zoning decisions for unincorporated areas, so areas outside city limits. Often a major developer would come before our council every month, like Lennar, for example, seeking approvals to change the zoning of agricultural land into single or mixed use housing. The county would provide us with packets that had recommendations on the applications. However, I was not led by what the packets said. The packets were a guide that were helpful and provided helpful information, but my guide was the community in front of me that I represented. Several times, members would come from the community to speak out against Lennar and about how these projects were not compatible with their neighborhoods. Often, residents would say, like, you guys are going to do what you want to do anyways, or express that their comments would not matter. But folks' comments did matter. One prominent experience of me serving on community council is when Lennar wanted to put townhomes in this agricultural rural community called the Redlands. A group of people from the Redlands came out to that meeting expressing that they were like second and third generation farmers and that the project would ruin their community and that it wasn't compatible. Although the packet from the county recommended that we approve the project, our board unanimously voted against it. The residents were shocked, but they were really, really grateful. Their advocacy saved their community. And today I just want to let you all know the importance of showing up and speaking out. Your voice could be the voice that changes and saves your community. So showing up equals advocacy. And due to this being a legislative training, I want to uplift the importance of advocacy, especially lobbying at the state level. So last year in Florida, we experienced one of the most brutal, and when I say brutal, legislative sessions in history. There were bills that were passed that criminalized immigrants, restricted voting access, and also limited local government's ability to pass ordinances to protect their communities. For example, it became a felony offense to transport undocumented immigrants in your vehicle. Also, in terms of restricting local governments, there was a preemption bill passed to prevent cities from to create legislation, on rent control. So as you can see here, here's a tweet from last year where it says the Florida legislator just sent a bill to Governor Ron DeSantis' desk that would give businesses the ability to delay and potentially kill local laws they don't like. So that was a huge bill that like gutted our advocacy. And with affordable housing, being a major issue in Florida and across the country, these laws severely affected thousands of people across the state. During this legislative session last year, I visited the Capitol lobby with a group called Local Progress. We spoke with Democratic reps and senators, and I will admit it was a very disheartening experience, just being honest with you all. Some of these elected officials were not fully aware of the impact that these bills would have. Some of them thought that these bills would be positive due to the way that they were written. And for example, there was a bill that was introduced that would allow landlords to charge a monthly fee to renters in lieu of a security deposit. And on the surface, this legislation sounded good to folks, right? In Florida, sometimes security deposits were double or triple the rent. But however, the problem with this bill was that there was no cap on the monthly fees that the landlords could deposit, and the renters wouldn't be allowed to get their money back once they moved out. So this legislation was predatory to renters and would harm them in the long run. And this is something that we sat with local state representatives to explain to them. We had to debate with one representative in general who did not see an issue with the bill, claiming that the housing crisis was bad and people just needed to get into homes. And unfortunately, like this legislation passed. So again, here's some pictures of me speaking with some state reps, advocating at the Tallahassee, which is Florida's capital last year. And this is why today's training is so vital. You all are preparing to step into rooms that the average citizen doesn't even normally like know about, much less are able to access. And we cannot assume that our elected officials are fully aware of the impact that these bills are going to have. Each and every single one of you present today is the voice of your community. You have the power to directly inform and influence the votes that are made this session. No matter the outcome, by showing up today, you are committing to being the change. So going back to a question I asked earlier, when legislative session is done, right, the work is still going to continue. How will you commit to showing up in 2024? And I want you all to think about this and know that 2024, as we all know, is a huge election year, and we have to ensure that our communities are prepared for what's to come. So I would ask you all over the course of this training to take your booklet and just think, how am I going to commit to showing up in 2024? Not just being at this legislative session and going to the Wyoming State Capitol to advocate for your communities, but what actions are you going to take past this to make sure that like there's real justice in our communities? So I ask you to take your notes section and just think about it over the course of the training and commit to 3 actions that you'll take with the Equality State Policy Center to really make change this year. So I'd like to close by saying, whether this is your first time lobbying or if you've been advocating for years, I sincerely thank you for showing up today. No matter the outcome, you are choosing to join the fight for justice in Wyoming. I am proud of you. I am honored to struggle with you in this fight, in defense and preservation of democracy across the United States. And no matter what, just show up. Thank you all.
Bravo. I think that there is people clapping all around. And if we could do a loud clap, we would. I can feel the energy in all of the rooms. And so with that, how this is set up is we will have a breakout session and then we'll come back and do question and answers then. Okay, so Marissa, the breakout instructions or
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, we'll disperse into breakout rooms to go through our first facilitated session. So if you're in person, your facilitator should have the instructions to lead this first event. And then if you're virtual, I'll pull you into a virtual breakout room with me in just a little bit. So just give me a second. I'm gonna put us all in breakout rooms and I'll see you soon. Okay, so it's 10:10. If our in-person groups can wrap up their conversations, and I'll hand it over to Jenny DeSaro to facilitate this conversation. If Jenny is back, turn on her camera. If not, I can kind of start sharing what the breakout virtual group talked about. So we all introduced ourselves, shared what issues we were thinking about, what were top of mind, our rose and thorn. A lot of folks talked about the divisiveness of politics in general, but also in Wyoming. And the small town feel that though it makes politics and these conversations very accessible, can also be very hard with that political divisiveness. And just talking about maybe let's all work together to have some Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems instead of furthering that divisive kind of nature. And we ended on talking about issues and trying to go forward with one for further breakout rooms. Like when we're looking through bills, we'll be looking at access to services, and that's access to mental health services, that's Medicaid expansion, that's rural services, OBGYN, maternal health services. There's even public transportation on there because we're such a dispersed, low population state. Getting access to those services means generally the state will have to provide funding or some kind of program, since localities are so far away from each other. So one, it'd be easier to connect them with state funds. But also sometimes there's just not enough money in the budget for a state standard of what those services look like. So with that, I will pass it off to Jenny if she is here. There she is. Perfect.
Sorry, running a little late. So with this time, we are going to, Carrie Ann had to leave, and so we aren't going to be doing question and answers, but if we could just have people share who are interested in sharing their whys, or what was their like a story of why they engaged, why they where they've shown up and advocated, or where they want to. Anyone?
So, I mean, I think like the whys, I mean, like we talked about those in the breakout session, right? Like Medicaid expansion. I mean, those hugely impact our clients that we're working with day to day. And everything from and even the transportation and stuff like that, like it all comes together. Like I do a lot of like recovery services and stuff like that as far as substance use. And so like I look at Medicaid expansion and I think of like how it kind of titrates down. Like if that were to be increased, you would increase accessibility to all medical services. You would increase things like dental care, which would then increase things like job stability and stuff like that, because a lot of people are negatively viewed because of things like their teeth not being, you know, right because of maybe previous meth addictions or something like that. So I just, and then like the transportation and stuff like that, like, I mean, how does a single mom with, 4 kids who's in a recovery program and has to go to court, do drug testing, go to work, mental health appointments and all of that, and lost their car and their driving privileges, like, and maybe has kids that have IEPs and stuff like that, manage all of this with a bus system that takes 2 hours just to drive around town in a circle, it just, so showing up and advocating for all of these different things is so important, because our clients are struggling, and yet the law is expecting them to be successful, but not giving them the tools to be able to do so.
Thank you, Faith. I think it's really helpful to have like examples and to kind of tie it together. And so I think what you just shared just gave a little bit of an image of what individuals deal with. Does anyone else want to be brave and share?
Jenny, it looks like someone had shared in the chat if you want to read that out loud.
Yeah. See, Dakota says, I spoke with my Senator Kale Case about abortion access and the effective limits on reproductive rights has on driving out quality OBGYNs from our state. So much of this is connected. And I'll have to say, this is, in my personal hat, this is definitely an issue that I find really challenging, particularly since the state of Wyoming, our constitution provides for everyone to choose their own health care. And it is dumbfounding to me that because I am a woman, that suddenly that is not a choice for me. The Constitution is for everyone, regardless of their gender. It's if you're a citizen of Wyoming, the Constitution is for you. Our state constitution is. So it's if anyone else would like to share thoughts on that, I'd be happy to.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so kind of, I feel like we've talked a lot about what you have talked about, which is healthcare access and like learning about how to have those conversations with legislators, and then kind of going with that with like, this is a big election year, right? This is going to make a big difference about what is going to happen in our state and country, and learning about it at a local level will help kind of help our understanding of both city, county, and state governments. And then personally, I really like why I'm here is to connect with other people. It's a kind of moment of hope and community that happens within SHAPE, right? We're all here to learn more and grow more together so that we can come together as a community to kind of save our state.
Thank you from the Laramie Watch Party. Is there anyone else from the Rock Springs Watch Party or the Cheyenne Watch Party that wants to jump in?
Hi, here you go. Hello from Rock Springs. My big why is my intersection between art and LGBTQ rights. It's super important to me, and I can show up in spaces that sometimes other people can't because of who I am and what I do. So that's why I'm here to learn, wanting to do more. I helped out once in a city capacity in multiple things, and I want to be able to do more.
Great, thank you. And then I did see Pat had her hand up, or him. Sorry, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, or a they.
It's girl.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to say I'm a retired family physician, and so healthcare is a really big issue for me, as well as mental health. And I've spoken with some of our local legislators, and it was very disappointing. And so I want to learn how to lobby and be more effective so that I can see if I can change some minds and get better health care and better mental health care for Wyoming citizens.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. That I see a couple applause there from the other screen shares. The access to healthcare is definitely an important thing, and it affects everyone. And there's so many elements from what we're hearing from everyone, that there's different elements to healthcare, from just your basic choice from what you do with your doctors, from having access to reaching your doctors if you have transportation needs, and then also having the doctors that you need the support from, and being able to in the location where you live, because we live in a rural state. So sometimes services that we need may not exist right in our hometown, and there may be additional travel. Any other thoughts for whys? And you like I could share just to kind of share a little of why. When Kellyanne was talking, I was reminded of when I was in junior high, and I did put this in the chat, but maybe some of you didn't see it, and I'll be a little redundant. But I was just very concerned about the hole in the ozone layer. I had a very great our geography teacher, and I did go to school in Wyoming, so kudos to Wyoming education. And he was just really inspired us with lots of different options, showed us what was going on in the world, exposed us to something larger than what was just happening to us locally. And I was so inspired that from this teacher, I made a poster and started advocating for stopping aerosol from being released into our atmosphere that was creating the hole in the ozone. But this same teacher also really got me interested into politics, and not so much as a party, but more of like what goes on, how do you participate when there is an election, how, and this was before I was able to vote. So I think my little diatribe here is more like it's never too early to start people to think about engaging, and so I'm hoping that that this is an opportunity to spread that way to engage. All right, I see a chat. And it's improving healthcare access can improve in employment rates, which is a great economic factor. Yeah. It is interesting. Our issues are not unconnected. Everything is really woven together.
Yeah, Jenny, that reminds me of something we chatted about in our breakout room. We talked a little bit about a catch-22 that I think a lot of people see in maybe activism or advocacy. People feel unmotivated to be part of this political climate that we talked about, but then also change will only occur if people join and be part of that movement. And we talked a little bit about in your introduction, what was that first step? What made you be part of maybe the political or advocacy landscape? So I guess just throwing a question out to the whole group, how can we inspire other people to be a part of this? I think everybody that's in the room, either virtually or in person, has taken not only the first step, but probably the first few steps by attending, by already being interested in this. But how do we get other people to be a part of the change that you want to see? So that's kind of a large question, but I toss that to you, Jenny, and then if anybody else wants to join in too with their thoughts.
Can go ahead. So just a little background information. I am a senior in the social work department here at the University of Wyoming. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about lately have been about empowerment and how do we engage with people in a way that allows for them to be curious rather than a kind of judgmental aspect when it comes to politics. It's a really privileged area, I think. It's kind of a really oppressive system just because of like all of the different ways, like jargon and different things that we use to kind of separate it and make it a bit more difficult for people to kind of just understand the process. So for me, the biggest thing I've seen is talking with people, engage in these conversations just in daily experiences. When you have these conversations and you bring that to power and to light, I think there's a lot of power that comes from that experience and sharing it with others. And you don't have to convince people of anything. Just simply sharing your own views, being respectful of others and their own opinions, I think is a really great way to engage people in a respectful and kind way.
Thank you, Faith. I saw some claps there. I don't know if people agreeing. Anyone else want to share a story of experience or? I will add that I do feel like just we are a small state people wise when we're spread out, but I think that even though it can be really hard, I think the persistent bringing up challenging issues to talk about and calling people in to discuss it is really a powerful way to keep people engaged and bringing up the issues. I get concerned about us shutting down because we feel too much opposition if we have an idea. And I think that one of the things about advocacy work is being bold. And so engaging in the conversation and doing it kindly and also with a curiosity to learn more is a way for us to bridge. Anyone else? Okay. Ryan, I see that you're on. Are you ready to jump in a little bit early ahead of schedule? Or do we all need, we kind of are, at least one party took a break. I don't know if Casper and Rock Springs and Cheyenne parties need a break before we jump in.
Jenny, this is Ryan. I can get going whenever you'd like. If you want to take a little break first, that's more than fine with me.
Okay. Well, I am looking for any hands that need a break. And I'm going to give them one more minute and then I'll introduce you, Ryan, if I don't see any hands. Okay. All right. So sorry, I gotta get into my notes here. So we are really fortunate to have Ryan Frost from the Legislative Services Office. And so if any of you hear LSO, that is the abbreviation for the Legislative Service Office, which Ryan works at. His role provides logistical support and training to legislatures. He assists with information requests from the public, and he serves as the media liaison. Ryan's career at LSO started in the Budget Fiscal Division, where he assisted in staffing the Joint Appropriations and Joint Election or Education Committees. Prior to transitioning into his current role in 2019, Ryan has an active work history in state government, spending 3 years with Wyoming Attorney General's Office as a paralegal for Consumer Protection Unit. He holds a degree in history and political science from the University of Wyoming. All right, Ryan, take it away. An important job.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Well, I sincerely appreciate that introduction. Appreciate everything and being here with you guys today. My first introduction to the Equality State Policy Center actually came from when I was my last year in college over at University of Wyoming. I was in a class taught by Pete Simpson, so Al Simpson's brother, and it was a wonderful class. And the director of Equality State Policy Center at the time, Dan Neal, came and spoke to our class. And anyway, I was just really inspired by a lot of the work you guys do. So just appreciate everybody being here today, and I'm just honored to be asked to come present to you guys. So I was asked to kind of give just an overview about hang on, there's a question here. Is it best to reach out to legislators regarding specific bills, or is it better to reach out with general issues? I appreciate the question, and I'm gonna go ahead and just point out the fact that LSO is nonpartisan. So, my role here today in presenting to you is more just sort of directing you to information, not necessarily advising the best way to advocate on a particular issue. I suspect that some of the other presenters may have an opinion on that. And sorry, I can't give maybe a little better answer for you on that. So what they asked me to present about today is just to give an overview about the legislature itself, as well as LSO, and then kind of do a screen share and kind of walk everybody through where you can find information online. So the legislature's website, which me and my fellow staff members at LSO work very hard to make sure there's always accurate and immediate information on the website. There's lots of different points where information is being input from computers on the floor as votes are being taken to votes in committees, things like that. And so it takes a lot of work to make sure that all that information is flowing out so that the public can view that information, know how their legislators are voting, and so forth. So, Jenny, without further ado, I'll go ahead and jump in.
Yes, please.
Okay, terrific. So the Wyoming Legislature is comprised of 93 total members. That's divided into the House and the Senate. So that's the traditional sort of bicameral legislature that we're used to seeing. Not all state legislatures are like that, however. Our neighbors over in Nebraska actually have a unicameral legislature, so they just have a Senate. They don't have a House and Senate. So I've often heard the term that states are sort of the laboratories of democracy. So I think that's a really neat concept and something I find very interesting, that each state sort of functions just a little bit differently in its state house. So for many, many years, Wyoming had a 90-member legislature. 2 or 3 years ago, the legislature went through a process called redistricting. So that's required by the Wyoming Constitution once a decade. So that occurs 1 year after a national census takes place, and so that they're able to use the current population numbers and then distribute the legislative seats and districts accordingly. So in that process, Wyoming was the only state that actually added seats to its legislature. So Wyoming ended up adding 3 seats, so 2 seats in the House and an additional seat over in the Senate. So traditionally, it had always been 90 members. We're now at 93. So the way that that's broken out is 31 members in the Senate, and those members serve a term of 4 years. And Wyoming's Constitution requires that somebody be a minimum of 25 years of age to run for office in the Senate. In the House, there are 62 members, and those members serve a term of 2 years, and the Constitution requires that they're a minimum of 21 years of age. Interestingly, the most recent election several years ago, we did actually have somebody who was just freshly 21 get elected, and so that does happen. So Wyoming's legislature operates on kind of a 2-year biennial cycle, is how I like to think of it. So part of that is driven by the budget itself and just state government in Wyoming. And so the way that that's typically broken out is that over the course of 2 years, Wyoming's Constitution says that the Wyoming legislature cannot meet for more than 60 days over 2 years. So the way that they've typically divided that up is to have a general session in odd numbered years that totals about 40 days. And in even numbered years, they have a 20-day budget session. So that's the session that we're in now. So in the budget session, that's when they typically adopt a budget. And that's what funds state government for 2 years. So you will also see what's called a supplemental budget in a general session. And that typically just makes any kind of adjustments up or down that may be required, at the time if revenues have decreased or something at that time. So you'll also see a budget bill during the general sessions, but primarily the main budget is adopted this year. So actually, the budget bill is going through second reading today in both the House and the Senate. So you'll hear lots of different amendments being proposed to the budget. Initially, members of the Joint Appropriations Committee, who's the committee that sort of drafts the initial budget, they receive testimony from all the different state agencies that receive an appropriation, and so that occurs typically in December and January. Then they come up with a draft version of the bill. That's usually published around the very start of session. And so late last week, the members of Joint Appropriations sort of during what's called Committee of the Whole, that's basically the first reading of a bill on the floor, and they just walk through the budget. They explain, because Wyoming's budget is highly complex. There's billions of dollars within it, and there's all sorts of different funding streams. So unless somebody has really studied in depth the budget, there's just lots of questions. So the first part of the process is for the members to explain the budget and what's happening, and then in Committee of the Whole, and then in second and third reading, other members can propose amendments to that budget. So that's the process you're going to see play out today and this week, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Okay, so one of the other key differences between a budget session and a general session is that any bill that's not the budget bill during a budget session has to receive a 2/3 introductory vote. So just really even to get through the initial phase, to start working its way through the process, it has to actually have 2/3 of the members vote to say, yes, we want to hear and debate this bill. So a little bit later, when I'm walking through some of the resources available on the website, I will try and remember to point out this last year we kind of developed a visual representation of the legislative process. It's just kind of a chart that walks people through, and so hopefully that's helpful for folks of this group and the public who are trying to understand the process. So the legislature is divided into 10 different committees. So each of those committees kind of focuses on a different area. So you have, for example, the Appropriations Committee, you have the Revenue Committee, the Agriculture Committee, the Judiciary Committee. And so all these different committees typically develop legislation throughout the interim that is related to their purview. And so you also have a number of other select committees and task forces. Sometimes those select committees and task forces are just temporary. They just only exist for a year or two. They develop legislation, and then the committee is dissolved. And sometimes they actually eventually put them in statute, and the select committee exists into perpetuity, I guess. Let's see. So another distinction is that the committees meet separately during session. So during session, you have the House and the Senate Judiciary Committees, for example. You have the House and Senate Appropriations Committees. During the interim, one key difference when they're developing a lot of the legislation is they meet together as joint committees. So standing committees during session, there's typically 5 members in the Senate, and then 9 members in House committees. So during the interim, when they meet jointly, generally those are 14-member committees. Again, 9 House members, 5 Senate, with the exception of the Joint Appropriations Committee. So JAC as it's often called, is a 12-member committee. So 7 members of the House, 5 members of the Senate. Not sure why it's different, but it is just slightly different there. I'm gonna shift gears here next to kind of talking about LSO and some of the things we do here, but I'll take a brief pause to see if there's any questions.
So I don't see any in the chat. If anyone has something, a hand raised. I don't see anything yet, Ryan, so.
Yeah, thanks,
Keep
Jenny.
going.
I don't see any either, so I'll just go ahead and keep plugging away. But certainly, you know, if anybody has any questions, please type it in the chat or raise your hand, however you prefer. Okay, so the Legislative Service Office was created back in the early 70s. So as I mentioned earlier, with each state legislature kind of functions a little differently. This is true also with the staffing agencies that support the legislature. So in many states, you have individual staff associated with certain leadership positions or offices. So the speaker or president may have their own staff. Here in Wyoming, we have one central staffing agency, that's LSO, that's the office I work for. And we provide those services on a nonpartisan sort of we do the nonpartisan administrative function of the legislature so that the legislature can carry out its constitutional duties. So one of the things that I talk about sometimes with groups is if we go back to you know, whatever, our 5th grade Wyoming history and civics class, you guys may remember the term the power of the purse. So you often have the 3 branches of government, right? So you have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And so the way that I just kind of quickly sum those things up, the legislative branch adopts laws. It also is responsible for funding state government. The executive branch executes those laws, they enforce those laws, and they carry out those laws. And then the judicial branch is the one who interprets those laws. So that's just kind of the quick version of the 3 branches. And so that is how it kind of plays out. And so with the term that comes to mind is power of the purse. So one of the primary constitutional responsibilities of the Wyoming legislature is to fund government. So so that's one of the things you'll see during a budget session like it is this year. So LSO actually is either the smallest or possibly the 2nd smallest legislative staff in the country. So small but mighty is what I like to say. What that actually means, though, is that many of us here wear lots of different hats. So I'll quickly go through kind of our different divisions and how that staffing sort of is broken out. So currently right now we have 44 full-time employees, and the different divisions is broken out. So first we have the Office of the Director. So basically the relationship there is that there's a committee called Management Council. So Management Council does a couple of different key things. So one is they are the policy-making body when the legislature is not in session. So they make certain decisions about the legislative calendar, things of that nature. They also oversee and appoint the LSO director. So that it's kind of like think of it maybe like a board of directors and CEO in what would be a private sector model. This is kind of a similar type dynamic. So Matt Obrecht, who is, you know, all of our bosses here at LSO, he is the director. And so he answers directly to Management Council. Matt is responsible for making hiring decisions and running the agency here. So for us to carry out all the duties that we're asked to do for the legislature, for it to be able to carry out its constitutional duties. So the Office of the Director is comprised of maybe 3 or 4 employees. He has a legislative council who sort of functions similar to what an assistant attorney general would for a state agency. So they provide legal advice and things like that. Anytime there's, you know, a complaint about a legislator or something, or even a member of LSO, they can do legal research and provide. So that's all part of the function of the Office of the Director. Next, you have the Legal Services Division. So this is probably the largest division within LSO. This is comprised primarily of attorneys. So these are the people who staff committees. They draft legislation at the direction of committees, and they also review administrative rules. So as after legislation has been adopted, often the state agency that's impacted has to promulgate rules in order to carry out and enforce the new law. And so they have to do an official process where they adopt rules, and one of the functions is that they have to send those rules to our legal staff here, and they have to review those and make sure it comports with the original intention of the new statute. So the Legal Services Division also has a number of what's called legislative editors. So those are, they're not attorneys, but they do a lot of, they're working professionals who staff committees. They draft some of the meeting minutes. They are also who help, you know, everything. You guys are probably aware that everything now that the legislature does is live streamed. So it's live streamed to YouTube via Zoom. And so the legislative editors are primarily staffed with kind of making sure all those meetings are recorded and posted online and all those types of things. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So next we have the Budget and Fiscal Division. So this is the division comprised of people with both economics or statistics backgrounds, and they provide things like fiscal notes and evaluations to bills. So once a bill is formally numbered is the term, and then it's posted to the website, it has to go through a process where a budget fiscal staff sort of evaluates it, and then they come up with, they often reach out to the state agency that may or may not be impacted, and then they come up with basically a potential fiscal impact of what adopting that legislation may or may not cost the various funds that fund state government. This is also the staff that drafts the actual budget bill, the general operations of government bill. This staff also was responsible for school capital construction, state capital construction. So anything that has to do with numbers and that sort of thing, this staff is part of who drafts a lot of the bills where those funding bills go. Next, you have the research division here within LSO. So the research division provides research services to members as well as committees. Those research assignments are confidential unless the legislator basically waives the confidentiality. There is a lot of those products available on our website, but this is when a member or a committee have a question about some program and they want to know, you know, how much money did this program receive over the last 10 years or something like that, and they can the people in our research division can then go do the research and provide essentially objective information for policymakers to, you know, to make decisions. And then finally, you have the operations division. So that's the division where I work. Basically, anything that doesn't fit neatly in one of those other categories is something that me and my operations colleagues takes care of. So we wear lots of different hats, and my title is Legislative Information Officer. You know, I take care of a lot of the content on the website. I make sure meetings are getting posted correctly. So much now it goes through both our YouTube channel, but also Twitter, or X is now what it's called. You know, we try and post out anytime a meeting goes live. We post all the materials associated with those meetings, And so a lot of the content on our website is something that that falls within some of the duties that I do. I also get a chance to visit with the public, sometimes give tours of the Capitol. Anytime a member of the public calls LSO and says, you know, how does, what happens next with this bill or something, that's often a call that would get referred to me. So just again, going back to the nonpartisan status of LSO, so we can't necessarily comment or weigh in on whether an idea is a good idea or a bad idea. Our job mainly is just to administer the process and then also explain all the different steps that it takes if a bill were to pass into law and things like that. So so those are kind of the divisions that make up LSO. Again, like I said, I believe there are currently 44 full-time employees, and we all just take care of a variety of different things. So I'll do another pause again before I shift gears to the website. Does anybody have any questions on anything that I just went over?
I have a quick question, which you might touch on a little bit later, but the in-person folks got the citizen guidebook, and then the virtual folks should have gotten that resource, the PDF. So I was just curious if you could explain a little bit about what that book is, and then if you have like your favorite fact or your favorite piece of information that you would want citizen lobbyists to know from that guidebook.
Okay, thank you. Great question. So this is what the question was regarding. So this is called our Citizen Guidebook. So this is something that basically my boss and I work on each year. We put out a new version each year. So this book is kind of the best, what I'd call one-stop shop for somebody who may not, have any sort of baseline knowledge about the legislature. This is the best place I would say to point you. So there's a variety of different things in here, from the seating charts on the floors of which members, where they sit, a map of the Capitol. But I guess I would just say, because it's kind of new this year, I'm going to point out this thing right here, and I'll actually do a screen share a little bit later and show you this a little more in depth. So this is something we worked on. This is what we call our legislative process chart. So this was something that that I worked on this past interim, and several other LSO folks here at LSO contributed to. It really is just meant to try and be a little bit of a visual guide, although there is lots of words, because frankly, legislating and making laws, the purpose is designed, the process is purposely designed to be difficult. And so, a member of the public who's just coming in, who's just getting to know the process, we wanted to try and get information so that folks could understand that. So this book generally is great if you have it electronically. This is something, if you come to the Capitol, we can give you copies. We produce this specifically for groups or for members of the public who just want to learn about the process or learn more about their state legislature. Did that answer your question?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And then we'll go through. Okay. Oops. Okay, so can everybody, is it showing my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Terrific. Okay. So this is www.wyoleg.gov. So this is the main website for the Wyoming Legislature. So there's tons of great information on here, and we do our best to make it sort of self-intuitive, but just by nature of the fact that there's just so much going on between so many bills, so many members, that sometimes it's hard to maybe find what you're looking for. So if you're having a hard time finding something, or if you have a question about what is available on the website, that's something you could call LSO or call me, and I'd be happy to point you to where you can find that resource. So, okay, so this is the home page. You'll notice here there's these kind of sliders. These will change throughout the year. We try and kind of highlight some of the things that are new or fresh in these initial sliders. So right now you've got this initial budget session information here. And something that just went live last Friday is the interim topic request form. So if you're tracking legislation after, or the activity of committees after session is over, this is where those interim topics and the ideas then can be submitted. So so those are just a few examples. But so these sliders will change, and like I said, we try and update them. They're probably updated about once a quarter, a little more often during session, just because there's just so much more activity. But anytime you sign into the website, kind of this will always contain kind of important information. But really what I want to direct your attention are these 4, what we call buckets down here at the bottom. So no matter what page you click on throughout the whole website, these are going to consistently be across the bottom here. So there's tons of great information in here. So initially I'm going to click on this calendar page right here. So this is going to inform folks, a lot about what's happening each day during session. And this page looks a little different during session than it does during the interim, just because there's just less activities during the interim. So during session, it'll break down, it's kind of a weekly view. And day by day, you can see these tabs across the top here. But during the interim, it will look different. It's more of a month view. Okay, so so right here, I'll call your attention initially to these 2 things. So these looks like somebody's maybe trying to get in here. Okay, they got it. Okay. So these first 2 items, this is going to be the bills that are up for consideration today on the floor of the House and the Senate. So if you click this details right here, this is going to take you to what's happening on the floor right now. And so this page will refresh anytime there's new information input. So this action on 3rd reading, so this is going to show you what the most recent action on each bill is. So you can read a ton of great information about the various bills that are on the floor that day. There's printout versions of this. If you come to the Capitol, just outside of each chamber, there's yellow and green sheets that will have a lot of this information. The purple sheet is also all the bills, both on the House and Senate side. Anyway, I typically point people to the website just because it's usually the most current. It's going to have the most up-to-date information. Going back just again to this main calendar page, all these committee meetings are committee meetings that occurred this morning. So you see here, you have the House Judiciary Committee, and they heard 4 different bills this morning. So these are the different bills that were up for debate during the House Judiciary meeting this morning. You have the start time, the location here, and then you have the details that you can click into that show you which bills they'll be discussing. You can click into each bill. We'll see that a little bit later. And then you also have this watch button. So this is going to take you directly to the YouTube video. And so every committee meeting and every floor session going back to about 2020 is available on Wyoming's YouTube page. Additionally, prior to that, we did record, and there are audio recordings available. But the further back you go, the less complete the information is. you know, we have, I think, recorded meetings and floor sessions, maybe going back to, I want to say maybe 2004, 2005. So I guess just because I'm here, I'm going to show you just briefly our YouTube page. So if you go to youtube.com and either search for Wyoming Legislature, or it's just youtube.com/Wyoming Legislature, this will go to our page. Anytime there's a live meeting, it will always populate that here at the top. Then down here, we have all these different categories or playlists. So this is how everything is organized. So this first category is legislative sessions. This is going to have all the both committee meetings and floor sessions for the last handful of sessions. Like I said, going back maybe to 2020 or so. During the interim, when the various committees meet jointly, again, as we talked about earlier, all those meetings are going to be in this next group. You can click here to view all, or you can toggle over this way. Management Council, we talked about earlier, that's all those meetings are here. And then you have some select committees and task forces down here. And then finally, these are some Capitol Square videos that give some neat history about the Capitol and things like that. So I'm going to go back here to our main page, but just quickly let you know, up here in the upper right-hand corner, there is this logo for our YouTube page. This will take you there anytime you click that. So that's how you can always click, find that. Additionally, you can, this is our Twitter or X link, and Gov delivery, which is also very important, which I'll touch on in just a little bit. But just kind of trying to wrap up this calendar page, you know, this is going to have all the meetings that occur today. During session by 3:00 p.m. is typically when we post for the next day. So all the different committees that, you know, they have to announce to the public when they're meeting and what they're meeting about. And so that's where you'll see these, again, they get posted around 3 p.m. each day for the following day. And so it'll have the time, the location, and the details. And so all this is just a great way to kind of stay on top, because especially during a budget session being 20 days, it's such a compressed time schedule that things move very quickly through the process. And if you're trying to track a bill, you know, all the tools are here for you to be able to do that, but you just kind of have to stay on top of it. And there's a few different places you can look to do that, and we'll touch on that. So the calendar page is very important. I wanted to point this out specifically. Again, you'll notice each day later in the week doesn't have anything posted quite yet. That's because it will change the day up to the day before. So this will always have the latest information here. So that's the calendar page. That's what I wanted to highlight first. I'm going to go back to our home page. Again, these 4 buckets down here. I'm going to click next on this committees page. So this is going to take you where there's a number of different types of committees, but really the main one that I think is most relevant to people are these joint and standing committees. So these are the 10 major committees that I mentioned earlier. Actually, there's 12, but the Journal and the Rules Committee don't really meet very often. They only meet during session, but the 10 main committees, these are the ones that really develop policy throughout, policy proposals throughout the interim. So if you are particularly interested in education, or let's see, earlier I heard some folks really talking about healthcare access. So the main committee that would develop legislation surrounding that would be the Joint Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee. So you can click into that committee. It's going to take you to another page, this committee page. You can go back all the way to 2001 and look at all the different committees, all the bills that they sponsored. I mean, there's just tons of information on here for you guys. So when you get into each page, always try and look for these tabs, because if you don't see it initially, what you're after, the information may be in those tabs. Sorry, I'm getting some messages here, guys. So this is so I'll click here. This is members, and this is going to show you who's on the committee. The co-chairmen are really key members. So the House and the Senate each have their own chairman, and when they meet jointly, the two chairs sort of jointly, they chair the committee meeting. They typically trade back and forth on each day. But anyway, so you'll learn more about, I think your groups will be talking about how to present information in those committee meetings. Typically you address the chair first. And so it's always important to kind of just be aware of who the chairs are of the different committees. These are the different members. So again, 9 members of the House, 5 of the Senate. And something just to keep in mind, so all this is linked. So you can come here to this individual member, you can click on their name. This is going to take you to their individual page. It's going to tell you the district they represent. It's going to have some little bio information. Again, the tabs, it shows all the committees this member serves on, any bills they've sponsored, as well as their contact information. So all 93 members of the legislature have contact information provided here on the website, often a phone number, and then their public email address and a mailing address. So, so I can tell you that that's not common in every state. Many states legislators don't have their contact information publicly listed. So that's kind of, I guess, where I'll leave it with the committees page, or this bucket, the committees bucket. There is lots of information again down below here. So I would just encourage everybody to kind of go through and click through and find, because there's just tons of great information out here. Next, quickly, I'll talk about this legislation page. So the first link down from here is going to be, so these are all the bills that have been filed for this session. And this will get updated throughout the session, although the introduction deadline was last Friday, so you may not see new bills, but this is going to be where a lot of, you can find a ton of information about all the different bills. So bills that start in the House are called House bills, and they're numbered sequentially. Budgets, the main budget bill is always going to be House Bill 1 or Senate File 1, so you'll see that here. And then something that I find really useful is this last action column. This is going to tell you the most recent thing that happened with that bill. And just to kind of break down some of this language. So H stands for House, S for Senate. And so H, failed introduction, and here's the vote count. And so as I mentioned earlier, during a budget session, bills have to succeed in a 2/3 introductory vote. In the House, that's a requirement of 42 votes just to even start through the process. So what this, just pulling this as an example, this is a House bill that failed introduction, and it received 40 votes for, 21 against, and then I believe this would be an excuse. So it probably means that that member was off the floor that day, or they were ill, not able to be there for that day, but they are excused. So I find that really helpful. But a few other things to point out is you can play with these things across the top here to sort the different categories. So you can it'll sort. So if you can look at different sponsors, so it's going to sort by A to Z in alphabetical. This is going to put all the different committee bills or different legislator bills all together. It's just a great way to navigate this page, which has quite literally hundreds of bills, and it can often be a little difficult to find maybe what you're after sometimes. So I just really always want to point out the sorting. It defaults to sorting in bill number, but you can sort by other things. later in session, this is also helpful. It's got this filter right here. You can just filter out all the bills that have already died by clicking on just active bills. Or if you want to see all the bills that died, you can click on inactive bills. So there's lots of great information on here. And then keep in mind, again, we're in the 2024 section right here. You can click down here and look at this drop down and pull up, excuse me. Sorry, I kind of swallowed funny. You can pull up bills from, here's the 2011 general session. And so you can look at all the bills from there or whatever year you're looking for. So there's just, again, there's tons of great information on here. And so that I wanted to make sure to highlight that for you guys. So let's see. Finally, I'm just going to go here to the legislators bucket. And so you can see House, Senate, leadership or total roster. So this is going to show you who all the legislators are. It's going to default alphabetical by last name, but again, you can sort using these different things up top here. And every single member, you can click on them and go through, see what committees they're on, what bills they've sponsored, as well as how to contact them. So that's really helpful. One other thing I'll point out is this Find My Legislator tool. This is really helpful. So we talked a little bit earlier about redistricting. So the different districts where different members represent different communities sometimes changes, right? And so if you just don't know who your member is, who represents you in the legislature, in the House or the Senate, you can click this, and this is going to launch a different feature. It's kind of an interactive map, and you can type in your address, and then that will immediately take you to who your House and Senate members are. It defaults to House, but you can click over here and do Senate. It's the same deal. So that's really helpful for finding out who represents you. Let's see. So the last thing I'm going to highlight here is this citizen engagement tab. This is going to have some information about attending legislative meetings, sort of what some of the protocols are to become a citizen lobbyist and track these things through the process. Sometimes you just don't know how these meetings are run or what are the protocols, when you attend these meetings. So I would just encourage you to poke through some of this information. This has a lot of great information in it. In the attending legislative sessions area of the website, this has our link to our citizen guidebook. This is the book that we've been referring to. We also have another public handout that's called How to Read a Bill. This, unless you're kind of a lawyer or a professional lobbyist, you've looked at this stuff, sometimes it's difficult to understand what a bill is actually doing. So this handout is helpful in trying to understand the structure of a bill and what it's actually doing. And then right here, this is what I highlighted earlier. This is the process flow chart. So this kind of walks you through each different step. So I hope this is helpful for folks because, the process is kind of complicated. So just want to make sure that you're aware that that's available to you if you're trying to understand the process better. And there's also, if you're interested in taking a tour of the Capitol for with a group or something, you can come here to visiting the Capitol Square, and it has information about tours and so forth. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about are these few things you can click on up here. We talked about YouTube, we talked about Twitter a little bit, but the main one I want to really highlight is what's called Gov Delivery. So this is an email subscription service where you can opt into receiving emails, either for a particular committee or for anything that is published to the website. So you can track different topics. You can track those floor calendars that we mentioned earlier, anytime those are posted, or the committee meetings for the following day during session, as soon as those are posted to the website, it'll generate an email and to your inbox. You can register for whatever topics you're interested in, but this is one of the best ways to stay on top of this. You can just enter your email. If you've already registered but you want to update your subscription, you still type in your email, and show you what that looks like. And it'll take you to another page, and you can click on all these different topics. So I mean, this is just a great way to track everything. That way you're not always having to go to the website and find it directly. This will just provide the link directly to whatever it is. So House and Senate session committee schedule, if you're trying to track what's happening in committees, standing committees, that's a great one. So all the different committees are provided on here, and you can just update those subscription that you follow basically any time, or you can unsubscribe if you're receiving too many of those emails. So that's really everything I wanted to cover as far as the website, and really just my remarks generally. Are there any questions for me, or questions about the website?
It looks like we have one from the Casper Watch Party. So I know that and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the training, but the public can testify in committees, either virtually or in person, or they can provide written testimony. But this person had a question of how many of the committees offer a virtual testimony option?
So most, if not all of them, should have that. So the rules of the Wyoming House and Senate do give quite a bit of deference or leeway to the chairs of the different committees to conduct their meetings how they want to. So there are one or two chairmen who are not always in favor of taking virtual comments, or they want to prioritize it lowest. But most of them, I know Management Council did talk about it right before session, and the presiding officers basically are encouraging all the committee chairmen to allow for virtual public comment in any of those meetings. So if you go to that calendar page, there should be a register, what does it say, to testify, and that's where you get the Zoom link. Be aware that those links do get taken down about an hour before the meeting starts, and that's just typically to just help the staff who are administering the meeting kind of get everything in order before it starts. But all of them should, but I can't 100% say that it'll happen 100% of the time.
Thank you. And if somebody had a question, maybe they saw a committee meeting that they wanted to testify virtually, would you recommend reaching out to the chairman on that question, or the LSO member that staffs that committee? What would you recommend?
LSO will typically direct you to the chairman. So the chairman run those committees, and they are the policy makers, so if you have maybe more of a procedural type question, that might be something that LSO can offer some information on. But if it has to do with, well, I think this is a good idea or a bad idea, and these are the reasons why, or I was hoping to testify and here's what I was going to say, I would urge that to go to the chairs.
And then I also received another question. Is there a dress code to visit the Capitol during session? Is that dress code different when you're maybe testifying in committee? What does that look like?
So there's not a great question. There is a dress code for members or anybody who's entering the chamber. But everyday citizens just visiting. There's not necessarily a required dress code. You can attend a committee meeting just wearing regular clothes. You know, I guess I would just say that often I just think that it might be, I don't know, I've heard chairmen say that they often will, if somebody's dressed nicely, you know, they sometimes tend to take them a little more seriously. And I don't, so it's certainly not a requirement. It's just, you know, something I would just throw out there. If you're coming to the Capitol to advocate for a position on a bill, you know, it might be wise to put on a nicer shirt or something like that.
Thank you. And then I have two other things. We have a comment from Mandira in the chat and says, I take this opportunity to thank LSO team for the great task that they are undertaking to keep the status of each bill accurately updated. And I second that. I think that the Wyoming Legislature, the LSO office we have, has one of the best websites. And there's a lot of information on there. So yeah, thank you. Definitely echo that statement.
Appreciate hearing that. You know, just candidly, we don't always receive real positive feedback, so it's nice to hear that. So thank you. A lot of work goes into it.
And then one last question is, could you give us a rundown of the budget bill quickly? Just kind of what that looks like and where to find information on that, if possible.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so again, if you come down here, well, there's a couple different places for it. So again, on the slider, 2024 legislation is going to take you to the same link that this is. You're going to the bill page. So the budget bill is slightly unique in that it goes through what's called a mirror bill process. So it's the only bill that's the same version of the bill is presented to each body simultaneously. And so then what happens is the House and the Senate go through their various readings and amendments, and then they once they adopt, you know, a House version of the budget and a Senate version of the budget, then what's called a joint conference committee is appointed, and that is made up of 5 members of each body. So 5 House, 5 Senate, and then those members are tasked with getting together and trying to kind of iron out the differences of the bill and come up with a final version of the bill, which then has to go back to the bodies and be adopted by a simple majority. But if you come back here to the website, House Bill 1 and Senate File 1 are the budget, although there are several other appropriations bills. So in years past, not to confuse matters, but in years past, when there was a lot of the federal money coming in for COVID stuff, so you had the ARPA money and things like that. So that would typically be a different bill. So that wouldn't necessarily be in the main budget bill. But when you come here to the budget bill, so this is House Bill 1, so this is going to be the House's version. If you want to look at the very initial version of the bill, I always encourage people to pay attention to this stuff on the right-hand side. So a lot of times it's easy to get, you know, to look over here with the budget, you don't see it as much, but they actually have the text of the bill on most pages. I like to look at it using the PDF version. So if you come here and click, this is going to bring up the introduced, you know, this is the original version of the bill prior to any amendments taking place. And this is helpful because you'll hear them both when they're considering amendments, but when they're talking about it on the floor, they'll often say on, you know, page 4, line 18 or whatever. And so you can come to page 4 and line 18. I just find the PDF version just easier to navigate. And as different versions of the bill take place as it moves through the process, you'll see those populated here, and it'll usually give a little description of what each version is. So as well as you've got some of the last action stuff, what actually happened. So the House passed it on committee of the whole. That's what COW refers to, but you see it often shortened to COW, committee of the whole. It's basically first reading of the bill. And then that took place on February 16th. So, and then the next action, the next time it's scheduled to be heard is this morning, starting at 9:30. And so if you go through, I'll draw your attention to this amendments tab. So this is something, again, that they're gonna, if you're listening to any of the floor sessions today, this is gonna be where a lot of this stuff is coming from. So these are all the House second reading amendments on the budget. And you can just come to this page and they'll go through these one by one. Often they will jump around. They won't take them in order, but they will take them in order of the way the budget is laid out. So just as an example, each state agency is associated with a number. The governor's office is 001, for example. And so they'll start there. I'm pretty sure that's how they manage it on the floor. They kind of jump around, but you'll always see when the member gets up and talks about it, they'll say, you know, I move, say, House second reading amendment number 24 to agency 66. So just to kind of break that down, what these numbers over here to the left mean is House Bill 001. So that's the first part of it. Then H2, that's House second reading amendment. And then it's amendment number 24. And so that just kind of allows you to track it a little easier. If you click into that amendment, it's going to bring you up a PDF version. And if you're trying to track it into the original bill, this is where it's going to say on page 48, line 14, this member is suggesting the following language get inserted there. And so, you know, admittedly, it is pretty complicated, but this is, you know, the primary funding mechanism for something like, you know, almost $10 billion worth of spending in, you know, our state government and local communities and things like that. It's, you know, there's a lot of important topics to be discussed here. Additionally, you can go down, so House bills is where it starts, but you can also go down to the Senate files. And it's, again, it's always going to be House Bill 1, Senate File 1. This is the mirror bill in the Senate. And here's going to be the Senate amendments that will be up for consideration during second reading today. Third reading on the budget is Wednesday. So you'll see more of these amendments populated probably Tuesday evening. They have to have them in the day before. But again, the same sort of naming convention here. Looking at this category, this is Senate File 1, the budget, second reading, or excuse me, S for Senate, 2 for second reading, and it's amendment number 47. So, so that's kind of how that works. As far as breaking down a lot of the numbers and so forth, is that something that you wanted me to kind of get into, Marissa, or just more the process?
I think the process, I think this is a great overview, and noting that all of these amendments, I mean, there's so many already. We haven't gotten to third reading. So yeah, really important stuff here. I thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. So, so yeah, 59 amendments just for second reading in the Senate, and let's see how many is in the House. I think it's more. It's about 80. So there'll be 80 amendments. Now, members sometimes will withdraw an amendment. Things happen. Doesn't mean that all these amendments are going to be adopted, but this is up for consideration today. So just while I'm here, I'll throw out a couple other things. So the fiscal note, this is going to be kind of a summary of the spending within each bill. Within the budget bill, there's lots of numbers here, but most bills, there's usually only one or two appropriations. That's going to be how much the bill will cost to implement. I'll also point out votes. Let's go to a different bill. This is because this, let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to go to this House Bill 3 right here. Okay. So again, the fiscal note, this is going to have information about any kind of appropriation within the bill. And then if you come to votes, this will tally up throughout session all the different roll call votes that occur. So what this means here is that the House introduced the bill and referred it to House 3, Committee number 3, which is revenue. So again, the 2/3 vote needs over 42 to move on. It received 59 in this case. And you can actually click on this and you can see the last names of all the members who voted for it, voted against it, or were excused. Additionally, the digest does a very similar thing, but this actually goes into and shows you how they changed it. So when they do adopt amendments and things like that, it'll actually have some of that language in here. So again, there's tons of great information at your fingertips. It's just sometimes knowing where to look.
Thank you.
Does that kind of cover what you wanted?
Perfect. I also got one more question. Received one more question. Are there bills that pass then don't get funded or do get funded? And would you see that in the fiscal note and the digest like you just showed us there? Let's say a bill is going through and somebody, again, makes an amendment to pull all the funding, so it's not maybe effective, even if the law passes. Would you see that in those two places?
Yeah, good question. And you would. So yeah, so just as not to confuse matters worse, but every bill that contains any kind of appropriation, not only does it have to go to its first initial committee, so revenue or labor or whatever the committee might be, but if there's any sort of appropriation in the bill, then it also then has to be re-referred to the appropriations committee. Now, the appropriations committee can't change the substantive language of the bill. They can only amend, increase, decrease, leave it the same, whatever the actual just appropriation contained within it. So you'll see that. And there's always kind of lots of nuances and wrinkles to how this process works, but there's always reason for why the process is that way. And for me personally, I love the process. I'm a total nerd for this stuff, if you can't tell, and really appreciate the fact that there is such a rigorous process because anytime a new law is passed, these folks are voting on legislation that's going to have an impact on our lives here. And so it should go through a rigorous process to get there, I guess is my opinion on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions before we let Ryan go? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that I learned a whole ton of information that I didn't know before. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate the work you do. Yeah, thank you.
And really appreciate that, and good luck with everybody. Just whatever issue you're tracking and in your own personal lives, just wish everybody the best. Thanks, Kurt and Shelly, appreciate the words. So just everybody, best of luck. And I was honored to take part. Like I said, I've been aware of the ESPC for a very long time, and wish everybody the best.
Thank you. Claps from Laramie, says Laramie Watch Party.
Great. So am I free to go? I believe, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you guys. Thank you so much for having me, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
All right. I think that, are we ready for our next speaker? Do we need a break? Oh, I'm getting let me just, I think we're, okay. I think we're gonna go ahead and continue on with our schedule. We're now we're a tad bit behind, but no worries, we'll catch up. So I am super thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Reverend Dr. Bernadine Kraft. And she is just an amazing activist and just has done so many wonderful things. So she is a native of Rock Springs and currently has been the executive director of the Sweetwater Board of Cooperative Educational Services since 2004. She began her career as a school counselor, as well as an adjunct psychology instructor at Western Wyoming College. Bernadine is the first female priest at Holy Communion Episcopal Church in Rock Springs. She is currently serving as the chairperson of the advisory board of the Wyoming Women's Foundation. And Bernadine has served in both the Wyoming House of Representatives and the Wyoming Senate, where she was the minority whip. And at the time, the only female senator. So her legislative experience spanned a total of 10 years. But we are so honored to have her today with us. And so I now will turn it over to Bernadine.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jenny. I so appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to be with you. I've loved ESPC for a lot of years. It seems like I've been talking with you folks for years, and every year it's really a privilege to do so. So what I would like to do, as Jenny mentioned, I spent 10 years of my life walking those hallowed halls of the Capitol, both as a representative and as a senator. And so my kind of role today is I caught a big chunk of Ryan's presentation, kind of about the last half, I think. And it sounds to me like you've received some absolutely excellent, I mean, really, really good nuts and bolts. This is how it works. This is what you do. Here's the process. I was really impressed with that. And I kind of wish that I would have had that when I was a freshman legislator, even prior to, because I've been a lobbyist too. Prior to going into the legislature, I lobbied for the Counseling Association for a number of years, and that's when we were working very hard towards counselor licensure. So that was some really contentious lobbying that was done at that time, and it would have been really nice to have known that process. So I really appreciate all that. I'm kind of here to talk more about the human aspect, because now what you've gotten some wonderful, wonderful advice about how to do it, where to go, resources, information available to you that is invaluable. But what I want to share with you are some things just from a personal viewpoint as a legislator, what works and what doesn't work. And I would love, since I only have a half hour, I would really love to have you ask questions as we go along rather than save them up to the end. So I don't know, whoever's monitoring the questions, I think that might be you, Marissa. And that might be tough, but I don't want to, because I can talk for a really long time. And I don't want to just sit here and babble about stuff that you don't care about. So if you have particular questions, do ask them as we go along. But what I really want to say is there are some ways that really work to get the desired results from your representatives using that information you have. And there are some other things that don't work quite so well. And I think one thing, at least I remember this, when I was first doing advocacy training and lobbyist training, is we get all that stuff. But then what I want to really highlight is lobbying and advocacy is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You don't lobby everybody the same way. And you have 4 very different categories of people. You have those who are opposed to your bill. They're probably always going to be opposed to your bill. They'll vote for it approximately 10 minutes after hell freezes. You've got that gang. Then you've got the undecideds. They're not sure. They'll go either way. Then you've got your supporters. The people that you, what you want to do is keep buoyed up and keep active and keep supporting you. And then, and possibly most importantly, you've got your sponsors. And one of the worst things that can happen is when you don't know who your sponsors are. I will never forget getting any number of emails from groups that I liked, groups I admired, people I admired, asking me to support my own bill. And I tended to respond moderately snarkily, like I was planning to support it since it's my bill. But I'm glad you like it too. What that says to me is you don't even know who I am. You don't know who I am. You don't care. You're just doing these. I'm sure you've gotten all the information about don't send out blast emails. We'll delete them immediately. Well, of course we will. But also don't say, dear Senator Kraft, please support X bill without first looking to see Senator Kraft's the sponsor of that bill. That's kind of a really, really important thing to do, is really work with your sponsors. What you want to do is you want to say, I see you're sponsoring Senate File X, Y, or Z. How can I help you? What information can I provide? And of course, the best time to do that is not during the session. The best time to do that is when those bills are first filed, when you're first talking to people. The best time is long before the session starts, because I'm sure as you've heard from many people, these sessions move very, very, very quickly. And sometimes a bill will pop up and you weren't expecting it to hit the floor for 3 more days, and there it is. There's not a lot of time to talk. There's not a lot of time to sit down and strategize. There's almost no time to go out and have lunch or anything like that. That's before the session starts. And I can't emphasize enough cultivating relationships with your legislators before the session starts, talking about things that are important to you, legislation you're going to try to work on or try to support. And do not just think about talking to your own local delegation. Obviously you want to. Obviously you want particularly your own House and Senate representatives to know how you feel. But your support base is statewide. You'll have people all over the state that are supporting different issues at different times. Try to work with them. What can I do? How can I help you? Wyoming is a citizen legislature, and I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of that because what it means is we're ordinary citizens with ordinary jobs. As Jenny said, I've been at Sweetwater BOCES for 100 years. That's my day job. That's my real job. And I didn't, when I was down there, I didn't have a staff. I was really lucky that I was one of the few that actually was able to bring down a legislative aid. Most people can't even do that. So we rely heavily on lobbyists and advocacy folks to give us our information. You're kind of our staff, if you will, because we don't have time and we don't have the resources to, as a professional legislator does, have a staff that researches all these different bills. We're a citizen legislature. It's good news because what it means is as soon as that session ends, we get to go home and we get to live with the laws we made. And I find that very important, but it's also very, very challenging. When I was in the Senate, I was working full-time I was also teaching, I was going to seminary, and I was a senator. And I couldn't have done the job I did without the really strong support and backing of those lobbyists that gave me the information I needed. So really work with them, really cultivate them. They want to know all the information, not just what's in favor of that bill, but what's the opposition saying? What am I going to get when I present that bill on the floor and somebody stands up to speak against it? What are they going to say? And how do I counter that? I need to have that information. And I guess that's really something I want to hammer home in terms of course, you're going to work on trying to get support from the rest of the body, from the other supporters and the undecided people. But don't forget your sponsors. I used to carry an awfully lot of bills for a couple of different organizations who I loved dearly and were very close to my heart and still are. But one of them one time kind of forgot about me because they were so busy romancing this group of people that were never ever going to support the bill. And I finally had to email somebody and say, if I don't get any information, I don't even know what I'm going to say about this bill. You got to help me here, guys. I mean, I appreciate that you want to go out and drum up support, but I'm not going to be able to tell them what they're supporting unless you tell me. So that's a very, very important thing to do, and it needs to happen prior to the session ever getting started, because I'm sure if you heard nothing else today, you heard how fast. So those are your sponsors. Your supporters the same way. You know, a lot of times it's like you feel like, well, we've got them on board, we can check them off and we can forget about them. No, you can't, because they're still going to be hearing stuff from other people telling them all the reasons they might want to think differently about that particular bill. So you want to keep up with them, make sure they continue in your camp. The undecideds, of course, they're the ones you work on because you have all that information that you want to share, that you want them to understand. What can I give you? What can I help you with? How can I help you understand? And the ones that are absolutely never gonna support you, you still want to contact them. You still want to keep in touch with them. And that's kind of hard because sometimes they're less than professional and sometimes it's hurtful. And I remember no one was more surprised than me when I ended up spending 10 years of my life in the legislature. I did not see that one coming, mostly because I'm pretty thin-skinned and I get hurt pretty easily. And people even said, how can someone that's as sensitive as you are deal with all the nasty stuff? And I was able to do it because I didn't personalize it. You're going to hear nasty stuff, unfortunately, especially from those opposition folks. Smile, be professional, say, let me leave this information with you. So I really want to, that's kind of one of the number one things I want to just really focus on is you're lobbying different groups and you must lobby them differently. So don't just think you can approach everybody exactly the same way. Don't think you can just send everybody an email and have it work, because if you send the wrong email to the wrong person, what's going to happen is they're probably going to vote against it, or they're going to be offended and then they'll vote against it. Don't ever do that. And I'm sure you've heard, don't send blast emails, send individual emails, but also know who you're sending them to. Don't ever phone a legislator and leave a message for them on the floor unless you've got their cell phone. Don't ever do that. Don't ever call the front desk of either the Senate or the House and leave a message, because they won't interrupt. They won't interrupt a vote to do that. And it's heartbreaking when the day is over, you leave, you get your phone messages, and here's all these people telling you something they wanted you to support that you just voted against because you didn't get their message. So don't ever rely on that. If you have their cells and you can send them a quick text, absolutely do that, especially when it's on the floor. One thing that's really important, and Ryan did a really good job of showing you how to track a bill and how to see as it's coming up and as it's hitting the floor and moving through the process. But one thing that's really a good thing to do, if this is something you're really passionate, this is one of your real big deals, is listen to the live feed. Listen to the live feed while that bill is being debated. And then if you've got your sponsors, you've got your supporters that you've been working really closely with, you've got their cell phones, text them while they're on the floor. I will never forget an amendment that I was carrying to the budget bill to add an additional amount of state funding to the federal subsidy for the school lunch programs. And I had information like this, but I didn't have a lot of local information, and I was getting killed by, okay, this is all fine and this is all great, but what's happening out in the school districts? And there was a gentleman who was just an amazing lobbyist that worked for one of the school districts in my district. He was the business manager, and he's texting me and he's like, Bernie, say this, say this, say this. And I would jump up and say, fresh in from a school district, I have data for you. That amendment carried, and it wouldn't have carried if that particular supporter who was listening and watching me slowly die because I didn't have local school district data texted it to me while I was debating that bill. So if that's something you're that passionate about, do it. It's worth it to listen, to hear what's going on. And if you can get through, that's the very best way. So those are the very best way to do it. The other thing that I would really strongly suggest is we tend to get very, very passionate, and we tend to get very involved, especially in our pieces of legislation. And we kind of can't even understand why somebody wouldn't support what we support and why they wouldn't love it as much as we love it. They don't. And sometimes in our zeal, we forget to look at the opposition. And by all means, whatever you do, be sure to let us know what's going to be said out there. How can I counter it? How can I counteract it? Always, always, always be honest and totally open with the legislators. Always give them the best data you possibly can to the best of your opinion. I remember one time I got data that was like 10 years old and it didn't work. So that's a very important thing to do as well. And share all of that with us. Allow us to help you, and start that long before the process ever starts, long before we get down to Cheyenne, because when we're down there, it's just so very, very difficult to move as quickly as that session does, especially during the budget session, which is, of course, 20 days and 40 nights. So that's a very, very difficult thing. And if you can get a hold of us and sit down and spend time with us prior to the session ever starting, because also the earlier we file those bills, the better chance they have of making the floor before cutoff, before the deadline for introduction of bills has passed. So that's just my kind of ramblings about the personal, what you kind of need to know from a legislative viewpoint and what a legislator looks for. And my experience with an awfully lot of legislators from an awfully lot of varying political viewpoints, they all feel pretty much the same way about ways that work to lobby them to advocate a particular bill or a particular interest you have, and ways that don't work so well. So that was kind of an overview about it. And I don't know if any of you have any particular questions that you might like to ask about anything specific in terms of approaching a specific legislator. So thoughts on phone calls, non-cell versus emails versus handwritten letters versus protests at the Capitol. Okay, so let me pull that back up so I can see the whole thing, because that was kind of a lot. Let's look. So phone calls, you can absolutely call, absolutely, and leave a message. Just don't do it during the session. Or if you do it at the very, very beginning when they're going to have time to get it. But if you call me and leave me a message or talk to me on the phone prior to the session, that's perfectly fine. That's absolutely great. Just don't do it during the session simply because there's such a very, very good chance that your message isn't going to be received in time. Emails are fine. They are absolutely fine. Just again, make sure they're not blast emails. Make sure if I get one that says undisclosed recipients, I'm going to delete it. If I get one that's got attachments, I'm going to delete it unless I know you and I know you're sending me information. If I get one that I know every single member of the legislature has gotten or every senator has gotten, I'm not going to read it. So make sure your emails are very, very specific and specific to that person. And again, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you know who you're talking to. Don't send the sponsor of a bill an email asking them to support their own bill. So emails are fine. Just do some research, because I think a lot of times you're all busy too. You know, you all have lives. This is not your job either. That's the thing about Wyoming. We're a bunch of citizens doing the best we can for our state. So you too don't have a whole boatload of time to spend researching and doing all that. And organizations will very often send you suggested email scripts. That's great. That's wonderful. Just take it and personalize it. Don't just copy and paste that suggested script and send it to every single legislator. Take it and use the information. Handwritten letters, if you want to just do a quick little, here's what I'm thinking. Thanks so much for considering it. I'm happy to email you with further information. That's very nice and very sweet and very much appreciated that you took the time. But unfortunately, again, just because of the time frame, what I like in an email, I like it short, I like it sweet, I like it to have bullet points. I want you to support this because of this, this, and this. And this is why. That's what I need. Very, very short. When handwritten letters are nice, after your legislator has worked for you and has voted for your bill and his support, send them a little note. Send them a little note and say, thank you for your support. We're sad it didn't pass this time, but we're really hoping we're going to be back, and we're going to hope you'll help us again next time. That means the world, because as Ryan said about LSO, they tend to not hear too many nice things. We never heard a whole lot of nice things either. We'd hear all the times we screwed up, but it was very, very nice to hear. Thank you. And again, remember thank you for sponsoring our bill. It meant the world. Thank you for supporting it. Thank you for helping us. Protests at the Capitol, that's always, we actually, interestingly, used to have a lot more rallies than we did protests. And those were always good. Those were always a good way to get a group of people together. So you had a base of support. One of the very first bills I worked on when I first went down as a freshman legislator in the House was an animal cruelty bill, and making animal cruelty and abuse a felony in some instances. And we worked a couple of years to get that bill passed. But people would come and not protest so much as rally outside the Capitol with all these wonderful dogs from like the Cheyenne Animal Shelter or whatever. And of course, a few cats, which spoke to my heart, I have to confess. Oh, that was effective. That was so effective and so supportive. And then when the bill passed and it was signed, we got one of those dogs to put his paw print on the bill. So it was signed not just by the governor, but by one of the dogs whose life we might have saved. Those are so effective. What's not effective is hate. What's not effective is meanness or anger. I think we're better than that. We see it a lot at different levels. One thing that I was proud of, very proud of during the 10 years I was there, we disagreed with each other. We used to fight like junkyard dogs on the floor. But then we had tremendous respect for each other. We treated each other with respect, and we tried to treat everyone who came to speak to us, even when they were speaking against particular pieces of legislation we were sponsoring or speaking against us. We tried to at least be respectful and considerate. And I think sometimes we're not as civil. I think sometimes we've lost our civility to a degree. I would love to be a part of bringing that back. We look at the national level and it's gotten so mean and so full of anger. I would so much rather see Wyoming do rallies in support as opposed to protests against. Best to talk to a legislator about a broad topic. That's a really good question. Best to talk to a legislator about a broad topic, such as supporting legal abortion care, or best to talk about specific bills. If you're just getting started, this is maybe summer, maybe it's right after the election and you're just going to be talking to someone and you are really anxious to do something about legalizing safe access to abortion care, and a particular legislator is going to work with you on that, that's when you can say, can we sit down? Can we talk about this? Can we figure out some ways to craft this into legislation? And give them some time and some thoughts and some working points about how to do that. And I'm going to put another plug in for LSO here, because that's where we don't have to write our bills. I always had kind of my personal favorites at LSO, the LSO attorneys that actually craft the bills. And I would go down and I'd say, this is what I'm thinking, make it legal. And they would, and they do such a beautiful job with it. So broad topics at the beginning, when we're looking at what are we going to bring forward, that's great. And it's wonderful if you can identify 1, 2, or however many legislators that are going to work with you on that bill. That's where you have the best chance, starting early, being right in there on the drafting of the bill process. Once the session is looming, the bills have been drafted, and there's not much time to draft bills. There were a couple of cases, and I had a couple of them where personal friends and personal lobbyists came to me about a bill, and the session had started. One was a good friend of mine that I had worked with when I was a school counselor, and he was a falconer, and he had these specific bills about falconry and the laws governing that. It was a strange little bill, but he was so passionate about it. And somehow or other, we got that thing drafted and we got it passed kind of from mid-session on. That's a real rarity. Usually talk broad at the beginning, talk specific when you're right in the fray going forward. And that, here's a good one too that Jenny put in here. How does one research who might be your supporters and your opposition in the beginning? One-on-one meets, or, if you kind of look and see the platform people run on, a lot of times that gives you some really good ideas. Like I was really specific in my campaigning, and I'm really proud that I never did lose an election, and that made me very proud. And I think one of the reasons was everybody knew exactly where I stood. These are the things I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about human rights. I'm passionate about on and on and on. So for me, I was kind of an open book. You knew exactly. Some people are more subtle. And so some people you more need to kind of try to, if they're your own personal legislator and they're in your community, it's great to say, congratulations on your recent election. Could we meet for coffee? I'd love to take you out to coffee and kind of talk about some things that are coming up that might be of interest to you, and that maybe you could help with. That happened to me also. A person who had some legislation that I would never have supported in 100 years did that, called me shortly after I was elected and said, let's have lunch and let me just tell you some things I'm thinking. And we did, and we had a delightful lunch, and I never did support any of his legislation, but we were, I would call us worthy adversaries, if you will, because we could understand each other's viewpoint, even though we didn't support it. So it's important to, yeah, it's important to know your supporters and your opposition. And that's where your groups help greatly. As I mentioned, I used to carry a lot of education related bills, and the Wyoming Education Association did a brilliant job of researching the people that were pro-education, the people who were not. I can never say enough good stuff about ESPC and the work they do in helping you with all that. So that's also very, very helpful in terms of, yeah, in terms of how you might be able to find out who are friends and who are foes, and treating them again. I'm going to give you the information. I'm going to share this with you. I hope you'll support it. I hope I can be of help to you. Let me know. That kind of thing. I see that once again, I've talked well past my time, which is my tendency. And I apologize. I thought maybe I could keep you back on time a little bit, but I made you even later. But if there's any other questions, I'd be delighted to try to answer them if there is time. If not, I don't know, am I standing between you and lunch?
So first of all, thank you so much, Bernadine. This was, I always love to hear you talk on this. I think it's so insightful to hear a past legislator talk about their experience and how to best be contacted, because you're so right. The 20-day budget session is so fast and you get so many points of contact from citizens. So I think this was very insightful. So thank you.
Thank you. You can tell how fast it goes by how fast I talk. They say you can always tell a legislator because they talk really fast. And so I did try to share as much as I could in the time I had. And I do hope it was helpful. And also, don't ever hesitate to reach out because, as I said, ESPC has remained one of my favorites for more years than I'm going to admit to. So don't ever hesitate to contact me because I'm always there for you, and a group that's very dear to my heart. So thank you for including me, and I'll really look forward to maybe seeing some of you in Cheyenne and being with you another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bet. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the time. Bye.
Okay, so we are going to move into our second breakout session. This one is going to be going over the website. We're just going to look at a bill that we talked about all the issues that we were interested in a little bit earlier, but we'll just go through, look at a bill that's going through the legislative session this session and just kind of click through, and then we'll release everyone for lunch at 12:30, and we'll reconnect, I believe, Jenny, if you can, at 1:30, and that'll be taking all of this information that we've learned and applying it, learning how we can maybe testify, write our legislators, where are those points of contact, and how can we actually bring that into action. Looks like my link was auto-corrected, so let me try that again. There we go. I'll go ahead and break us into breakout rooms, and then those in-person groups, feel free to talk to your facilitators and work your way through that website. Okay, so just give me 1 second while I make those breakout rooms.
Okay, so our next speaker for you all is Rachel Martinez. She is the Executive Director of the Wyoming Civic Engagement Network, a passionate advocate for marginalized and underrepresented, and works to empower local communities toward equitable and systematic change. Her passion was ignited decades ago at her first nonprofit job, working as an advocate supporting domestic violence domestic violence victims. Sorry. A first generation student, Rachel received a BA in journalism and an MPA from the University of Wyoming. So we have a great opportunity to have her here with us today. And so I am going to turn it over. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak at a SHAPE training. I find that when I attend SHAPE trainings, I learn and grow every single time. So I love the opportunity to be able to learn how to even be more effective in fighting for the Wyoming I want to live in, and in a state that I loved so much. So thank you for having me. I appreciate the introduction. A little bit more about myself is most of my professional adult life, I've worked in nonprofits. And so fighting for those nonprofits has been a little bit of something that I've had to just learn to do, a little self-preservation, right? To have the jobs and have the funding to continue to do that nonprofit work in the communities. And I really got my feet wet with crafting my message when I worked for first generation TRIO programs. So supporting first generation students with my work with student support services. You might also know the other programs such as Upward Bound, Talent Search, Gear Up. So I really got my feet wet in advocating and legislating and lobbying at the national level, right? And I wish that there was a magic formula that I could share with you all for being more effective than not. But a lot of it was trial and error and just sometimes the stars aligning for things to actually fall into place when it comes to crafting your message. But there are some commonalities I really want to share with you today. And ironically, I had a co-presenter, but he has to actually be at the Capitol today to testify and move forward on his bill. And that's just the nature of this work. So together we put together just some tips on effective advocacy and how you can craft your message. And I look forward to learning and growing with you. And hopefully we'll have time for some questions, and I can also share out some materials. So to get started, I just want to say that your advocacy efforts are key in helping to shape both the state laws and the budgets. We have a part-time legislature in Wyoming, and most of you on this call know that we know our legislators who live and work in our communities. We go to the store with them, we attend church with them. And so we really have a prime opportunity to get to know our elected officials, not only at the legislative level, but at all of the levels, our school board level, our municipal level, even our county commissioners. And so even though we are legislators who serve at the state level, they really don't have staff working for them. We have a prime opportunity to share our message in a very unique way. It's 6 degrees of separation in Wyoming turns out to be more like 2 or 3 degrees, right? And so holding our elected officials accountable and making sure that they know that they are elected and that they are here to serve us. And even sometimes I feel like I might be in the minority when it comes to my representatives. I have an opportunity to know that they are not just representing the people that voted them, they're representing their whole district, right? And so sometimes I can take solace in knowing that even if I feel like I'm constantly fighting against the things, that those representatives are there to serve me as well. And so those efforts are really important. So from the drafting and introduction of a bill to its passage, to any issues that you want to carry about, the number one thing that I think is important is just your passion, right? What is driving you to get involved? So for me, when I worked in TRIO programs and first generation programs, for us at the national level, it was really knowing that if we could get more funding for our programs, we could serve more students. And what was good for first generation students was also good for other students. So we really focused our efforts on knowing that, yes, we were fighting for funding also to keep our jobs, but also to what we stood for represented so much more than that. It represented better retention rates for our students. It meant that we were having more opportunities for people who were maybe marginalized and who maybe were limited in their opportunity to pursue post-secondary education. So that passion was ignited in me because as a first-generation student, I knew how important those programs were, so that we could grow community leaders and get those voices heard. Also, when you think about it, who is lobbying and who is speaking out for students, right? So when we would go to DC, we would see that there would be, these national lobbyists that are paid, millions of dollars to do their business. And so crafting our message against that, it was difficult at times. But one of the things that's really going to take your message forward is that passion that you bring, and also understanding that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So sometimes we know that it's going to take maybe several cycles to get our messaging across and to not give up on what you feel is important. So we're in a quick budget session, right? So we know that there's not a lot of time to be in touch with legislators through the actual budget session. When it starts, it's fast and furious. So one of the things that I want to stress is interim. That interim session is so important. When you feel like you have an issue that you're going to want to take forward, knowing and paying attention to the interim session can be very effective in helping you move your message forward. Also, just knowing who represents you in your district and how they communicate with you. I have been lucky. I've only, in my time in living in Cheyenne, I've only lived in 2 districts. And each of those districts, I had very effective legislators who believed in communicating with their constituents. I just recently got a letter from my representative, Landon Brown, who sent a letter out to every one of his addresses about how to communicate with him during session and how to get in touch with him. So that's really important, is also knowing who your direct legislators are. One of the things we recognize is that there's going to be bills that are passed by individual legislators and bills that come out of committee. So when you're crafting your message, it's really important to know where you want that message to go and how you can be more effective in taking that message forward. So whether it's an individual message that you have, that's going to be just as important as any other message, but tying that into coalitions, other people that maybe have a similar interest with you is going to help take that message forward. So what we know is that it's that there's a lot that legislators have to know about, right? They have to know about a lot of nuances and a lot of bills. So where your message is going to apply and where it's going to live, that's really important in the time frame for that. So I'm not sure if I can share in the chat, but I have a couple links. Here's the good news, is that things, even though they move fast and furious, you might not know exactly where your message should go. There are people to help you. So the Legislative Services Office is a key area for reaching out. If you aren't tied into a coalition or a group that's watching and tracking legislation, then they can be really effective. The website you can go to, but sometimes it's even hard to know where things are in the process because things move so fast. So being updated on bills that are introduced and where they are in the committee and where they are in the reading, right, is really key. So I have something that I can share. Through the state legislative process, there is, especially during a budget session, it is really hard to get that 2/3 introductory vote, right? So for me, what's been effective for me in sharing my message and getting my message out is really tying into a group who is passionate about the same things, and really attending committee meetings and even just listening to them and listening to other testimony can be very helpful. And that way it can make it less intimidating when you are going to share your message. So you can contact your legislator, you can contact the committee members 365 days out of the year if you want. But really, it's going to help you to move your message if you know when they are going to be paying attention a little bit more based on where they are in the legislative process and where they are with committees. So I don't want to say that that your message isn't going to matter as much and you're late to the game, right? If you just contact your legislator the first day of session, because you can contact them anytime, but probably you're going to be a little bit late to the game. And so being aware of where your bill is, where the issue is that you're passionate about is going to live, that's really key to getting their attention. So one of the things that I recognize is that knowing where bills are can be really confusing. So I often refer to the grid, and I'm going to see if I can put that in here. I believe I can share in the chat, yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to put that into the chart, and that just helps to see where everything is. Right now, if you go onto the legislative site, so maybe you're passionate about sales tax and you want to speak out, you want to speak your mind on that, and you have a message, that you want to share. So you can just go on and see that even in the revenue committee, one of the sales tax bills, it's failed, right? It's not going anywhere. So you can save your energy on that. But say you are passionate about another bill that's maybe been passed through on introduction, and you want an opportunity to share your thoughts on that. So paying attention to where that's going and when that's going to be read, and if there's going to be opportunity for you to share your message during the legislative session, that's going to be more pertinent for you to pay attention. Where I really find that there is opportunity to share the passion and craft that message and share it, like I mentioned, is in the committee work through the interim session. So I'm involved with a coalition that's interested in better healthcare access throughout Wyoming, right? And so we have meetings together where we work on crafting our shared message. So that can be really key, because one of the things that legislators will pay attention to is they will pay attention to the amount of messages they get. Now that's a fine line sometimes, because some of the legislators will get frustrated if there are hundreds of messages coming through, and trying to make those all personalized messages, but sharing the same thing, that can be frustrating to legislators. What I find interesting, though, is it's only frustrating to them if maybe they're on the other side of things. So I often say, just share your message, right? Because you never know. They will pay attention to a lot of those group messages that share the same narrative, but still trying to personalize those messages is really key, and understanding, having a common voice, right? So if you are really interested and passionate about, for example, passing better opportunities for healthcare access, there's definitely other groups that you can get involved with. And that way you can practice a shared message. And if you have some intimidation about how to craft your message, that's a really good way to get your feet wet with crafting a message that you can take forward that has some common language and some shared narrative work. And so it can be intimidating to just even craft a message online and send it. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's just got sent through the space, internet space. And how are they going to receive that? So oftentimes you're not going to get a message back from your legislator, especially during this time. They are busy. So one of the other ways in getting that I found effective in getting messages across is utilizing that interim time, and also knowing your legislator and where they stand on issues. So you can look at their past voting records, you can look at the committees that they do stand on, and the great thing is, with the technology that we have, all of the committee meetings are streamed, right? So you can go on YouTube and you can go and watch a committee hearing anytime, right? To just learn about how your legislator is standing, where they stand on issues, how they feel, and what's happening in that committee. The other thing that I love about the opportunity to be involved in those meetings is then you can see how other people craft their message and what they're saying. One of the important things about selling your message and telling your message is making sure that you can find some common ground and come at your messaging with respect. Ultimately, above and all, there is more that we can agree on than we can disagree. When I worked in federal TRIO programs, and we went and we knew that when we visited at the time she was Representative Lummis, that she was in a different place with the education issues than Senator Enzi. Senator Enzi was a member of the HELP Committee, Health, Education, Labor, Pensions. At one point, he was a minority ranking member. So we knew that we were maybe going to get some more attention from Senator Enzi than we were with Representative Lummis. However, we knew that still forging that relationship and bringing those stories forward to her was really key. One of the things that, so we knew that in terms of the budget funding, she was not going to align with what we were asking her to do. However, we knew that we could relate to her in another way, and we knew that she had some counterparts that we had asked to reach out to her office to ask her to be on our education caucus. And sometimes caucuses are just in name only, but it was another way to get her involved and keep in contact with her about our bigger issues. And ultimately it did work, even though we knew we weren't going to get her big votes. She did reach out and help us with some letters that she signed on to in terms of pushback when we needed to against the Department of Education. So same thing with the local level, right? You may know that with your message that it might not fall in the way that you want it to, but that doesn't mean that you're not still building that effective longer term relationship. We have to remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that sometimes our legislators, once they hear the message over and over again, and you build power with that message, that it's going to stick, right? And so not giving up, just knowing that maybe you felt that they didn't hear your message the first time, they didn't really respond to you, finding another way, we had in-district meetings with one of my coalitions, and that was really effective, a group of us, because when you go individually, yes, they will meet with you a lot of times, but when you go in a group and then you can isolate your individual message amongst that group, that's also an effective way to make those inroads with your legislator. So it can be intimidating to go in front of a committee and share your message. And oftentimes that is a process that you have to be prepared for. So one of the things we like to say is, make it relevant. So how are you tied into that work? How are you tied into the committee? Who are you connected to? And really, what is your expertise, right? And you don't have to be a policy expert to be able to share your message. but anything that you can do to show your research and your expertise with this issue is going to help you to lay that groundwork to why your message is important. The other thing is just knowing that, yes, personal stories are important, but if you can tie your message into more quantitative data, right? So oftentimes it comes down to funding, right? And whatever message you are sharing. So if you want better healthcare access, if you want safer opportunities for your community, right? If you want a school built, how's that going to tie into the fiscal notes, right? That they're all looking at. Legislators, especially the legislative body that we have, it's a conservative body. It always ties into that fiscal note and that funding. So doing a little bit of research on your part to understand where your message fits in terms of overall funding of things, that can go a long way. So a little bit of research and just understanding where legislators stand, where that committee has stood on the issue, that can be really important. A lot of the work done on bills happens in the committee. They decide which bills are going to receive the most attention. They hold hearings on the bill, they propose and adopt amendments, and then they vote on the approval of that bill. And so that your messaging is going to be key into how they're hearing about it. Also being willing to be flexible, right? Because things change fast. Bills are very elastic. They take different shapes. So knowing where the bill is and how it maybe has changed out of committee and when it's gone back and forth through committee on the whole and on from one chamber to the next in terms of being able to see how it's changed, that's really important to know. And I'll go back and say this again. There are people that are do this work and pay attention. So you can always call over to the Legislative Services Office and ask them to give you support on where the bill is and what it's doing. Again, because getting in touch with your local, your elected official, your district legislator, it's going to be tough, especially in the middle of session. They're inundated every day with things. So writing to them and saying, hey, what's going on with this bill? You might not get that immediate response. So getting involved in the interim session is key. Knowing where the bills are and how they're being supported in and out of committee is important. And then paying attention to the floor action on the bill. And again, we all have jobs, we're busy during the day. So really just taking that time, especially if you are crafting a message that you want to go forward, just knowing where that is. So spending some time after you get home and looking at what the day looked like for these legislators, that's key. When you build an effective relationship with legislators, it's really important to follow up with them and to thank them for their work, regardless if they support you or not. We know that they are busy. So sharing those personal stories when you're actually sharing your message in giving testimony on your message, you want to keep that really concise and tie in that individual messaging and unique stories that you bring, but also knowing that it's going to be so brief. You're going to be talking just for a couple minutes. They will tell you, they will say, hey, we only have a couple of minutes. And if something's been said, we don't want you to repeat it. So making sure that whatever your message is, that you have a couple of different points to bring up, because if somebody goes before you and they say what you were going to say, and then it comes to you and you just say what's already been said, that there's going to be frustration. So being able to really personalize it and then being able to have a couple of different message points so you can definitely adapt. That's key. And then those personal stories are important. But those can also be shared by a letter, an email, a follow-up phone call, because you really want to focus on data as much as you can, data messages when you're sharing your story. Always identify yourself when you are communicating, whether it's with an email message or an oral message that you're giving. Identify yourself, why, and this is also important, knowing that you as an individual, right? Making sure if you are, that you're not speaking on behalf of your workplace if you don't have permission to, right? So that you're identifying yourself as a constituent, or how you're bringing this message forward. If you are involved with a coalition or a greater group that's moving forward, making sure that you're communicating with them so that you guys are using your time effectively to share as much as you can without repeating, right? I want to also share with you in the chat the Joint Appropriations Committee meeting that was done before session started, where there were some very effective testimonies that were given. And I was really impressed with the testimonies that were given by some coalition members of Better Wyoming in support of the Department of Health budget. And so I want to share that out with you too. Let me get that and share that. And you have an opportunity to go in and watch. And that can also help you to be empowered to tell your message. They focused, there were 3 different messages that were given out, actually 4, I think, and each one talked in support of the Department of Health budget and fully funding that. But they each brought separate, powerful stories and testimony tied to their community. That's the other thing, is that your community and your tie into your community and how it impacts your lived experiences in everyday life. That's so key. So if you can come up with numbers about, this is why this your support for or against it is going to impact the community that I live in. And if you can really show those numbers, that's key. So I will get that and also share that in the chat. And so repetition also is key. The number of times that a legislator hears about an issue from their time they're elected to office until they leave office plays a key role in whether they favor a cause or issue. It is interesting that we're in a budget session and then we have so many new freshman legislators. So that can be also a scary thought, that you have these newly elected people who are just, working through the budget. So I never assume that they remember the issue that I've that I've worked to, say before. So I always take a very introductory side to crafting my message and not assuming that they already know. Because if they already have the information, they're going to come back and tell you. So I would rather repeat the issue and give them the basic information. Freshman legislators, sometimes they might just not know, whereas a more seasoned legislator probably has heard it. But I always feel that it's better to be more thorough with the information than not thorough enough. So it's important that you communicate on a consistent basis with your legislators, keep them updated and informed during all stages of that process. And you can ask, for support from your allies. And if there's other people that are passionate about the same issue, having help with your message is key. Keeping your materials brief, straightforward, and simple. We all know that we can fall into the problem of using acronyms, and so really just spelling it out, even though legislators pretty versed on acronyms and things in their state, but still just and then also sharing your message with printed materials, right, and sending those out, but also trying to keep it really concise. And one of the things that my co-presenter put together was just really relying on smart, goal. You've heard of smart goal keeping. So smart goal setting. So how you deliver your message, applying to on using ethos, pathos, and logos. So ethos, you appeal to the credibility, right? Why should they trust you? What is your tie-in to what you're trying to say? And then appealing to the emotional side, right? But knowing that if you have a very emotional story, like one of the testimonies that I recently heard, it was so sad because of our mental health care gap. There was a young person whose life was lost. And it would be easy for me to just break down, if I was sharing that story. So practicing that very emotional message, if you're going to bring that in, because if you break down, your message isn't going to get told, and the legislators aren't going to hear through that. So absolutely appealing to that emotion and those personal stories. And then the logos aspect of appealing to logic, right? The reason, the facts, the data, the evidence, and bringing that forward. And then clearly defining the issue. What is the problem you're trying to address? And of course, I mentioned just crafting your message to be adaptable and being ready to shift. And then it is when I've sat in committee hearings and people are giving testimony, oftentimes legislators will really pay attention to the individual person giving the message, right? So if you introduce yourself as being part of a coalition, they kind of like, okay, well, we're going to get some kind of canned response or something. But as an individual constituent, I find that legislators really are open to that and hearing from their individual constituents. A lot of times they'll lay it down on the line and say, okay, we don't have a lot of time for testimony. We don't want you to repeat. So get on here and move along, say your message, and then move out and move new people in. And then they'll get to a part too where there's plenty of time. So they'll just even ask for people from the audience to come up and give testimony. So just making sure that even if you didn't plan to speak, that you have an idea of the message you want to say, and don't be afraid to get up there and use that opportunity to share a story and share your side of things. And then and paying attention to the timeframes and what is the follow-up. So you crafted your message, you gave your message, and now what? So it's important that you follow up with a legislator, with a committee, just to say, hey, here's some information, hope to hear from you, and send them a follow-up, send them a thank you, especially if what you asked them to do and your message was heard and they go in favor of what you were advocating for. Always send a thank you. We don't have time today to go into the training on using media to sell your message, but I will just say that using media and being able to tell your message in that way also is important. So you can always have an opportunity to use news outlets. Those are tools to help you deliver your message, to get it out to more people, and making sure that you are aligning with the media outlets that are going to support you. So those are really in the context of crafting your message and exercising your your civic muscle. These are all, it's taken me a lot of time to really be comfortable with getting in there and sharing my message. As I mentioned, there really is no magic formula. The other thing I will say that value-based messaging is huge right now. And so one of the things that I would like to share with you, that one of the, through my work, we ascertained that there are values that you can use in your communications and messaging that resonate with Wyomingites. So we worked with a research firm to go out and hear from Wyomingites about messaging and what resonated with them and what they believed in, and the values that you can always put forth in your message that will align nicely are hard work. Wyomingites definitely believe in that. They believe in freedom, right? So we hear that all the time in messaging, on pamphlets and on billboards and on radio ads and just in general. Freedom, huge. Community, right? So tying this back to your local community and to your legislator and why that's important for your community. Honesty, right? So being honest in crafting your message and why it's important, and using facts that will resonate. And then pride in where we live in our great open spaces. So those, using common narrative messaging can really help you to craft an even more compelling message to your legislators. So let's see some other key things. If your message doesn't resonate or you feel it's not hitting right, there's going to be another interim session that starts shortly after this budget session ends. A general session, sometimes that might be an easier time frame to get your messaging across, because there'll be more time period for that interaction, and things won't be so fast and furious. So don't give up. And settle for, well, not settle, but just know that there's going to be little wins that you can gain across the way. So even if you felt your message didn't get across or didn't resonate, or it didn't go as far as you wanted it to go, let's repivot and just try your message crafting again, because the consistency of the messaging is so important. And you can always just try again, because we're constantly going to have legislative sessions. That's what we do. And just knowing that there's going to be things that come out of this session that will drive the next session. So that's going to be really important as well. And then you can really get back to your message and say, okay, it really didn't feel like it worked this time. What's going to work next time? And how can how can I redefine that message? Yeah, so those are some of my tips just in terms of sharing forward your message. I definitely want to share with you the Joint Appropriations Committee testimony video. So let me grab that. Put that in the chat. I would love for you guys to listen to that. And it's playing now. So let me just copy and paste this. And it starts about at 13 minutes. Oh, can I share my screen? I'm not sure. Can I share it?
Yes, you can. Just make sure when you do, you click the button or the checkbox that says allow audio to come through, however that looks, or else we won't be able to hear.
Okay, let's try to do this, because this would be really cool. Okay, so let's see if we can. So are you seeing this?
Fully fund the department.
Are you hearing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Joint Committee. My name is Anthony Sylvester. I am one of the organizers with Better Wyoming. I also work as a wraparound provider for the Children's Mental Health Program and the Wyoming Legislature. As an organizer with Better Wyoming, I have talked to hundreds of people about healthcare and what it is about healthcare. The biggest issue we have identified is affordability. This issue affects the tens of thousands of people who do not have insurance. People often do not have healthcare at all. However, the issue of affordability also impacts income. The plans are deductibles or required to be Department of Health budget that you are considering includes funding for several programs that directly affect the community. Sadly, affordability is a huge issue for us. My son is disabled and he's on the development of disability waiver. This program means a lot of things for my family. It gives my son some independence away from me, and also gives me some peace of mind. The program gives me some freedom and the ability to work. It's very difficult to start with those. I'm a hardworking single mom, but I would never be able to work with myself. Looking for the children's mental health paper, I just pass along some of what I've learned. Even if they're not on my support. There's a way to make these programs that is in line with that. They have their own programs. I work to Wyoming Legislature. For instance, one of the programs in Wyoming is the revenue, using moms to get covered from the Senate program that's last year. Because of other reasons, that's
Thank you. Thank you. Just so you know, I have son as well.
So there's two more testimonies after that. And what I really, really liked about the aspect of this testimony, it was relevant, and you could see that the legislator, Representative Nicholas, said, I can relate, right? And she brought in facts, and she brought in her personal story, and she made it relevant to her community and why that impacted. She wrote that down so she could concentrate on that message and not get off track. And I thought that was just a really good example. The testimonies after that, the link that I'll share, is just really compelling, the testimonies that they gave. So I just wanted to share those out with you as an example. And there's just so many examples of good testimony that you guys can watch. So I posted the link here. Yeah, so with that, I would be happy to take any questions. I would be happy to have other people chat about what they find effective and what they've learned in sharing a message. Yes, those testimonies are so powerful. And what I also found with that is, funding the Department of Health is just so big and ominous, right? But what I liked is that they took that and kind of pared down the issue in terms of saying, okay, within this Department of Health budget that is so huge, this is the mental health care aspect and so they even took it down into a level that was that was usable, right? And that was relevant, even though it's just a huge budget with so many different things happening. So I really appreciated that. So the link, I hope that the YouTube link, you'll have to go to the entire committee hearing, and then around 13 minutes is when the testimonies actually start. There's also later on down the road with this committee hearing is there are people that are asking to fund the Department of Health, and there are people that are using their messaging against not funding the Department of Health. So it's always compelling to me to see the difference of opinions and how people craft their message and speak out on behalf or against it. Yeah, so at this time, are there any questions that you have for me?
Don't see any hands. I did want to say, so we've talked a lot about the interim session, which I believe Ryan mentioned in his presentation is the period between legislative sessions. So in even years like this year, we have the budget legislative session where we go over the budget bill. And then in odd years like 2025 and 2023, we have a general legislative session, which is a little bit longer. But in between those times, committees will join together. So the House, let's say the House and the Senate Judiciary will join together and talk about issues and try to maybe sponsor some bills or dive deeper into a study and try to just come up with some solutions. So Rachel mentioned a couple of times about how important it is to be involved in those. Rachel, can you talk a little bit more about that process? How are topics decided? Is testimony taken at all of those committee meetings? Where are those committee meetings? And then why is that such a good time to build relationships with legislators?
Yeah, so the interim session is, I would even say, is a little bit more important sometimes than when you get to the big session. The committees undertake complex and major issues during the interim. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of work that they do to do research and to make sure that what they're going to be passing through is going to be vetted and has data on it and all of that. So there are committee hearings all across the state in the interim, right? So whether it's labor committee, education, and so sometimes finding a home, like say you're passionate about something, just knowing where that's going to live, right, is important. So obviously, if you're passionate about increasing pay for teachers or the education budget, that's going to maybe be in the education. But that's why it's so important to communicate during the interim to maybe know where your issue is going to be held, right? And just kind of going back to if you look at this year's budget issues and bills, you can see who is sponsoring which committee is sponsoring what bill, which individual legislators are sponsoring their bills, and you can kind of see, is it is it part of corporations? Is it part of minerals, right? Labor, judiciary. So it is somewhat, it is a little bit of research on your part to know where, and also talking with your legislator, because only legislators can introduce bills, right? So you have to be in contact with legislators, whether it's your own or just somebody affiliated with the committee, to get your issue passed. So then knowing who is going to take this on, that way you can effectively communicate with them, that's key. That's what I would say, absolutely. And getting involved in those meetings year round. They post where they're going to be held. You can go in person, virtual now. It's so easy to just get on and yep. And then there's a time frame for submitting interim topics. And so that's it's really key to just speaking out and figuring out if there is a topic that you're going to want covered and getting on the ball sooner than later, like being ready to go now.
Yeah, absolutely. And another note, you need a legislative sponsor to submit an interim topic. Interim topic forms, the request opens up on March 1st. They usually decide them right after session. The management council will look over all that. Well, first the committees will look over all the topics that were submitted to them, and then management council will we'll usually take the recommendations and carry those out and assign them for the interim based on how much money and how much time is available. So a lot of organizations like the Women's Foundation that I was a part of last year submitted a couple of interim topics. Only one got picked up. So there are organizations around that are willing to help you submit an interim topic or willing to let you know what interim topics they are submitting, so you can kind of jump on that. So we have a couple other questions about really like the nuts and bolts of testifying. So it says, what is the exact process when testifying? Do you take a number, sit in a group? How do you how do they know that you are there to testify? And the other one is, how do I introduce myself? Who do I speak to? And what is a time I should plan for? So those are a ton of questions, but
right. Yeah. So if you're speaking on your own behalf, you don't really have to, you can just go and, you know, kind of speak on your behalf. If you're really representing a group or organization, I would recommend that you look at doing lobbyist registrations. And again, making sure you're paying attention to not convoluting this with your work, and just really making sure that you're speaking out as an individual, right? Or if you are with a coalition, making sure that that you're following their lead in terms of where you're going to go and how you're going to get together. And so then usually before a committee, there's going to be a registration. There's going to be, you sign up, right? So that they know. Also, there can be a sign up period before the committee that you can pay attention to. Let me get to do, so when you arrive at the committee, you're going to sign the attendance sheet, right? Indicating you are attending the meeting. You can, that's where you can have your citizen input. And then if you'd like to provide written information to the committee, I've used a committee handout form. So when you arrive at the meeting room form, you can always communicate with the committee staff, right? Like I mentioned, there's always going to be somebody to help you. So you can always ask those questions. And then of course, there will be a time period where usually the committee will tell you when they're going to take public testimony. And then if you're going to address the committee, there's a decorum as well. So always to be effective, you're going to want to address the committee chairman, call on you to speak. And these are things that by listening to other testimony, it can be a little bit less intimidating. And once you do it the first time, you're golden. And it's gonna really help you to just do it, get it over with, and know that your voice is important to be heard. I really wish more people would take the opportunity to speak out. It can really be intimidating. So just making sure that you have your message ready to go in a concise point of view, so that way they can hear you and get all of the information in a concise way, and then following up with them in terms of sending them information if you have more than what's going to be available in your 2 to 3 minute testimony. Yeah, I hope that helps. There is a process, but it's pretty easy.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for Rachel before we head into the last breakout session of the day? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you so much, Rachel. If you want to stick around and help us craft our elevator pitches, we would love to have you, but understand if you cannot. Great. Perfect. Let me again do the breakout room thing. So we are going to go into breakout rooms online. We'll still be in the same one in person. Make sure you talk amongst your group. Giving an elevator pitch, you can pretend that you're testifying to a committee, just like Rachel kind of laid out. Talk about why your voice is credible, and that could just be that you're a citizen of a district that's affected. You have children that are affected. It doesn't have to be that you got your degree in education. It can be that you're just affected by this potential law or issue. Talk about the issue, talk about the law, connect it to your story. And so we'll break out, we'll take about 5 minutes to work on those individually, write them down is the best way. So we just practice a couple of times And then in those breakout groups, we'll go around and each give our pitch. And then if people are willing, coming back to the full group, have a couple of people share and maybe we can workshop it. So when you are practicing, make sure that you are following that logic, which I will post in the chat that Rachel said, the ethos. I forget the the flow of that one. But then also when you're listening, make sure that you're providing constructive feedback so that you can help your group partners kind of form the best elevator pitch. And so with that, I will break this all out. Feel free to get started, our in-person folks. Thanks.
Well, what an amazing day. I hope that you all have been rejuvenated with ideas. And I just want to thank you all again for your time, for showing up today. I do want to do one more call out to all of our sponsors for today, which include Wyoming Women's Foundation, Wyoming Community Foundation, Natrona Collective Health Trust, the University of Wyoming Service Leadership and Community Engagement, Wyoming Equality, the Good Mule Project, and the Equality State Policy Center Chair Project. So again, thank you all. And as I think about today, I wanted to just do a little summary. I think like we've had a lot of takeaways for today, so I don't know if I'll do it justice, but I'm going to give it a whirl. And I think it starts with Kellyanne saying, show up and step into your power. And this power is your passion, you're utilizing your voice, committing to a cause for as long as it takes, the time, dedication, and hard work that requires. And then we were switched into Ryan with the LSO, again, Legislative Services Office, which is an important tool for everyone who's participating in the legislature, from the legislature side as well as the lobbyist and citizen side. So we got a great overview of the legislative website, including how to find committee meetings, what bills are going to appear in those committee meetings, remembering to look after 3 p.m. for the next day's session, how to sign up for notifications so that you can stay in the loop, and finding the contact information for your legislature are just some of the things that he touched on. And then we got Bernadine spoke from her firsthand experience serving as a representative and a senator, which is a pretty unique perspective from both chambers. And she reminded us that building relationships begins before the 40-day general session and 20-day budget session. And then it continues long after, reminding us that personalizing our emails is going to, and making them concise and attaching pertinent information is really valuable. And then in the moment of debate, being on hand, watching and supporting silently and through texting, giving information to support those who are sponsoring the bills that you want to pass. And the reminder that we all need to strive for civility, and that means understanding others, even if we disagree. We're not a homogenous state. We're going to have differences of opinions, but can we still maintain a civil discourse? Which is, I think we can. The other part of her message was that nasty stuff is going to happen. And the best way that we can preserve ourselves through that is to just not take it personally, even though it can be hurtful. And then we moved into Rachel with a great reminder initially of this is a marathon, not a sprint. So it takes time to do this work. whether it's lobbying your school board or lobbying at the legislature. All of that engagement is important. And so it begins with researching your issues, coming up with data, building your story and your testimony. And then that testimony should be concise, depending on the format, if it's person to person or a phone call or over lunch. And that we can establish credibility just by acknowledging that we are the constituents who elect these folks. And that gives us a right and a buy-in to what governs us. And then to clearly define issues and the solutions, incorporate story and data that's relevant and helps to influence and make connections. So that is my summary. ESPC's goal is to empower you all on how to build skills and resources, combine that with your personal passion. So we really have hoped that that's what this has provided for you all. And so with that, I want to spend this last couple minutes going back to Kellyanne's initial challenge to us all. How will each of you commit to showing up in 2024? So right now, just take a few minutes and think of 3 things you can do. And then if you would, write them in the chat. The chat's not very active. It can be signing up for getting legislative updates, starting to follow a committee that you're really interested in. It could be following your city council or following your school board. There's a lot of healthcare oriented folks here. So following the Health and Labor Committee. Meeting with I see a couple, writing a letter. Great. Monitoring bills during the session, reaching out to local lawmakers. Tell my friends about what is happening. Word of mouth is super powerful in a small state. Tracking bills, kind of getting familiar with the website. Even if it's not a bill, if you're not there to engage in that moment, just learning how to navigate the website. Coffee invites. Excellent. Vote 411. And there's a link in there. All right. Well, I am going to share the floor with my fellow. Oh, we still have some. Before we completely sign off, I would like to remind everyone that the Equality State Policy Center, this is one of our grassroots trainings, SHAPE, but we also have some other events coming up, and we'd love if you happen to be in Casper or in Cheyenne on tomorrow, February 20th. We have a reception at Paris West at 5:30, and you can RSVP to Rosa. If one of my team would please put Rosa's email in the chat, that would be great. And then on Thursday, February 29th, we have what we call the People's Review Live, and it's every other month. And there'll be a great session coming up there. So please join us for that. You can also watch recordings of that. Then we also have coming up a Capital Collaboration Day and it's hosted in Cheyenne by the Chair Project, Wyoming Citizens Engagement Network, Wyoming Independent Citizens Coalition, and the Hispanic Organization for Progress and Education. It's an opportunity for the Hispanic and Latino community members to tour the Capitol and watch committee hearings and the floor and just get a hands-on encounters with the legislature. And that is, I believe, March 1st. Put it in the chat if I have that incorrectly. And then finally, we have on March 27th, we have our next Wyoming Tax Facts. And it's a great opportunity to learn more about how Wyoming funds itself. And we have various topics, working with lots of partners on that. And we'd love for you to join that. You can register on our website. So with that, I am going to share the space with my team members if anyone would like to add something that I may have missed.
I think that was everything. Thanks, Jenny, and thank you everyone for coming. A very, very special thank you to Rosa Reyna Pugh, who planned and executed this event while she was in Rock Springs hosting a watch party. So I did my best here in Cheyenne at the Capitol trying to assist, but she really put in the work to make this event possible. So round of applause for Rosa.
And this was a first time with the watch parties and the scenario we did. So we do certainly welcome feedback if anyone wants to send us emails or it was a great thing. And I also commend Rosa and all of her leadership in this. And with that, I think we're ready to conclude unless there's any last minute questions or anything. We do have tomorrow morning, if anyone wants to is in Cheyenne and wants a little tour of the Capitol and things, I will meet folks at 10 a.m. by the front door, preferably inside. And if anyone is there, then I'd be happy to walk you around and bring things into a more tangible base.
Thank you so much, everybody. This was amazing.